Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we begin not with fireworks or founding fathers, but with the small quiet sound of wood shifting as the night releases its grip. You wake before the sun, not because you want to, but because the house decides for you. The walls creak softly as cold loosens its hold, and somewhere nearby a rooster practices, announcing the day far earlier than anyone asked him to. The air smells faintly of yesterday's fire ash and damp wood mixed with the earthy scent of packed dirt beneath the floorboards. You blink slowly, eyes adjusting to the dim grey light, filtering through a small window that was never meant to offer a view, only a suggestion that morning exists. You lie still for a moment listening. Wind brushes the side of the house. Someone shifts nearby, maybe sharing your bed, maybe sleeping, just a few feet away behind a thin wooden partition. Privacy is not part of the design. Comfort is limited. This is not the kind of life where you lounge awake considering your dreams. You probably will not survive this if you arrive expecting modern ease. Survival here begins with awareness. We're paying attention before you even sit up. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, feel free to share where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights and let your breathing slow as the day unfolds around you. You rise carefully, feet touching the floor with a small shock. The wood is cold. Shoes wait nearby, stiff and worn, shaped exactly to the feet that use them every day. You slip them on because walking barefoot is a luxury that belongs to warmer months, and even then only sometimes. The house is quiet, but not silent. Somewhere embers still glow in the hearth, faintly alive after the long night. Fire here is never just decoration. It is warmth, safety, cooking, and reassurance all at once. Colonial homes in the 1700s are built with purpose, not comfort. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that most houses are designed to conserve heat and materials rather than space. Ceilings are low, windows are small, light is something you ration, glass costs money, and every opening is another invitation for cold to enter. You move toward the hearth and stir the ashes, gently coaxing the last warmth back to life with practiced motions. This is muscle memory learned young. Outside, the world begins to wake. You hear the muffled sounds of neighbouring houses doing the same quiet dance. Doors open, coughs echo briefly. Someone splits wood with a dull rhythmic thud that carries through the morning air. Communities are close, not just emotionally, but physically. Houses cluster because isolation is dangerous. This closeness means help arrives quickly, but it also means you're always being noticed. As you step outside, the ground feels uneven beneath your feet. Paths are worn by habit, not design. Mud clings to everything after rain. Dust coats everything in dry spells. The smell of animals is constant, sharp, and unmistakable. Livestock live close because they must be protected, and because their warmth can matter in winter. Chickens scratch nearby, unconcerned with your presence. They have their own schedule, and it does not wait for you. You take in the morning light as it spreads slowly, touching rooftops and fence posts. There is no rush, but there is urgency. Work begins early because daylight is precious. Candles and lamps exist, but they are expensive and dim. Sunlight is free, and so the day bends around it. Historians still argue whether this constant alignment with natural light shaped colonial psychology, making people more patient or simply more tired. Either way, your body learns quickly to move when the light allows. Breakfast is simple. Cornmeal porridge bread from yesterday, maybe a bit of leftover meat if fortune allows. Food here is fuel. A quirky detail that surprises many is that sugar, while present, is treated more like a medicine or luxury than a daily pleasure. Sweetness is rare enough that children remember it vividly. You eat slowly not because you savour it, but because wasting food feels almost immoral. Every bite carries the memory of the labour that produced it. As you eat, you listen. Conversations are brief, practical. Plans for the day are reviewed out loud, even if they never change. Routine provides comfort. Today will look much like yesterday, and tomorrow will resemble today. Fields need tending. Tools need repair. Animals need feeding. There is always something that requires attention. Idleness is suspicious, almost dangerous. A person without purpose quickly becomes a burden. You step back outside with your bowl cleaned carefully, because leaving food behind attracts pests and judgment in equal measure. The sky is brighter now, pale blue, stretching overhead. Weather matters deeply. A sudden storm can ruin crops. A late frost can mean hunger months later. You glance upward, automatically reading the sky the way others might read news headlines. Clouds carry information. The community begins to move as one. Children are sent on errands. Adults head toward fields, workshops, or neighbouring homes to exchange labour. Money exists, but barter fills the gaps. Trust is currency. Reputation is everything. Once lost, it rarely returns. Scholars continue to debate how much individual freedom truly existed in these tightly bound communities, where choice often bowed to necessity. You pause for a moment, standing still, feeling the cool air on your face. The day has begun, whether you feel ready or not. There is no sense of personal destiny here, no grand narrative unfolding in your mind. Life is made of small repetitions. Wake, work, eat, endure. Yet within these repetitions, meaning quietly forms. Relationships deepen, skills sharpen, survival becomes almost graceful. As you move forward into the morning, the house behind you settles again, empty for now, waiting patiently for your return at dusk. It will shelter you again tonight, imperfectly, but faithfully. And as you take your first steps into the work ahead, you carry with you the quiet understanding that this world does not bend to you. You bend to it slowly, day after day, learning its rhythms until they feel almost like your own. Sleep never truly releases you here. It only loosens its grip enough for the next stretch of living to begin. By the time night returns, your body already understands what it will be asked to do. You feel it hours before darkness arrives, a low awareness settling into your shoulders and legs. When evening finally comes, it does not announce itself with leisure. It simply replaces daylight and you adjust. Inside the house, the air grows cooler quickly. Heat fades faster than you might expect, even after a long day tending the fire. The hearth still glows, but it no longer dominates the room. Shadows stretch and gather in corners, softening shapes, until furniture feels more like suggestion than object. You move carefully, hands knowing where things belong without needing to see them clearly. Beds are not what you imagine if you are thinking of comfort. A mainstream historical detail often surprises modern listeners. Most colonial families share sleeping spaces, sometimes entire beds, sometimes entire rooms. Children pile together for warmth. Adults sleep side by side, not out of romance, but necessity. Heat is shared because it must be. Privacy is rare enough that no one expects it. You prepare for sleep slowly. Clothing comes off in layers, but not all of it. Night clothes exist, but they are simple and often just a cleaner version of daytime wear. In winter, you keep more on than you remove. Linen touches your skin, rough but familiar. Wool waits nearby in case the cold sharpens unexpectedly. You learn to sleep with options within reach. The bed itself creaks softly as you settle in. The frame is sturdy but basic. The mattress is filled with straw feathers. If you are fortunate, corn husks if you are not. It smells faintly of dry grass and thyme. You turn carefully, finding a position that does not press too hard against a knot or seam. Sleep here is a negotiation, not an escape. Someone shifts beside you or nearby. You feel the warmth of another body through layers of fabric. It is comforting, but it also reminds you that personal space is a modern invention. Breathing patterns overlap. Coughs are common. Snoring is tolerated. Silence is rare and almost unsettling when it happens. The house itself continues to speak wood, responding to temperature changes with small pops and sighs. A quirky but well-documented detail is that many colonists believe sleeping positions affect health. Some are convinced that lying on your back invites illness, while others swear by sleeping slightly upright to protect the lungs. Pillows are used sparingly, sometimes rolled clothing taking their place. Comfort is filtered through belief as much as experience. As your eyes adjust to the dark, your mind does not immediately rest. Thoughts wander through unfinished tasks, weather worries, and quiet calculations about supplies. There is no artificial glow to distract you, no screen pulling your attention away. Darkness is complete enough that it feels thick. Your thoughts slow because there is nothing pushing them forward. Outside, nightlife begins. Insects hum softly. An animal calls in the distance, unfamiliar enough to keep you alert for a moment. The wilderness never feels fully pushed back, even here. Historians still debate how deeply this constant proximity to untamed land shaped colonial anxiety and resilience. You simply know that sleep always includes listening. Children nearby breathe unevenly, sometimes murmuring in dreams. Nightmares are common though rarely discussed. Death, illness, and sudden loss are part of daily awareness even for the young. You learn early not to expect permanence. This awareness seeps into sleep, making it lighter, more alert. You rest, but part of you remains ready. The fire dims further. Someone gets up quietly to tend it, careful not to wake the room. This small act feels intimate, almost sacred. Fire is life through the night. Letting it die completely risks waking to bitter cold, stiff hands and dangerous delays in the morning. You drift in and out, aware of warmth increasing briefly, then settling again. Dreams arrive differently here. They are shorter, more fragmented. You wake often, not fully, just enough to adjust your position or pull a blanket closer. Blankets are heavy hand-made and imperfect. They trap warmth unevenly, leaving some spots cold, while others overheat. You learn to tolerate both without complaint. At some point, true sleep settles in. Time passes without marking itself. When you wake again, it is not because of an alarm, but because the house shifts or someone else moves or the fire demands attention. Night is not a single block of rest. It is a series of pauses between awareness. Scholars continue to discuss whether colonial sleep patterns, often broken into two segments, were a response to environment or culture. Some evidence suggests people expected to wake during the night, using the quiet hours for prayer, thought, or small tasks. If you wake now, you do not panic. You simply lie still, listening, letting rest return when it chooses. Eventually, the darkness thins. You sense it before you see it. The cold changes texture. The house holds its breath. Morning approaches not as relief, but as continuation. You have slept enough. Your body knows this without checking the sky. You stretch carefully, mindful of those around you. Another day waits, and you will meet it much like the last. Sleep has done its job not by restoring comfort, but by making endurance possible again. You rise quietly, stepping back into the rhythm you never fully left. Morning light creeps back into the room, slowly touching fabric and skin with equal indifference. You dress almost without thinking, hands moving through familiar steps, while your mind lingers somewhere between rest and readiness. Clothing here is not an expression of mood or creativity. It is armour, signal, and necessity stitched into one. Every piece has a job, and comfort is rarely part of the contract. You begin with linen thin and pale worn close to the skin. It absorbs sweat and oils, protecting the outer layers from the body's constant work. Linen scratches slightly, especially when new, but you stop noticing after a while. Everyone does. A mainstream historical fact worth lingering on is that colonists wash these undergarments far more often than their heavier clothes, sometimes weekly, if water and weather allow. Cleanliness exists here, just measured differently. Over the linen goes wool, always wool. It is heavy, warm, and stubbornly resistant to moisture. Wool smells faintly of animal. Even after years of use, a scent that never quite disappears. You pull on stockings, then breeches or a skirt, depending on your role, and finally a jacket or bodice that has been mended more times than you can remember. Repairs are visible, expected, almost respected. Perfect clothing would raise questions about waste or vanity. As you dress, you feel the weight settle onto your shoulders. Clothing here carries weight in every sense. It slows your movement slightly, reminds you of your body of gravity, of effort. Fashion exists, of course, but it moves slowly, crossing oceans and years before reaching you. By the time a style arrives, it has already softened into practicality. Bright colours fade quickly. Browns, greys, and muted blues dominate not by taste alone, but because dyes cost money and fade fast. A quirky detail often overlooked is that some colonists believe certain colours protect against illness or misfortune. Red flannel, for example, gains a reputation in some regions for warding off chills. Whether it works or not hardly matters. Belief itself becomes part of survival. You wear what you trust, not what looks appealing. Shoes come next, stiff leather shaped by long use. They pinch slightly at first, then ease as the day warms. You check the soles, automatically aware that a broken shoe can derail an entire day's work. Replacement takes time. Leather is valuable. Nothing is taken for granted. Hats are chosen carefully too. They shield from sun and rain, but they also communicate status. A well-kept hat suggests reliability. A damaged one invites assumptions. Outside, you notice others dressed much like you. Differences exist, but they are subtle. A finer coat, cleaner cuffs, a slightly brighter ribbon. These details speak quietly but clearly. Historians still argue whether clothing differences reinforced class divisions more strongly than law in colonial communities. Standing among your neighbours, you feel how quickly judgments form without a word spoken. As the day progresses, your clothes respond to labour. Wool traps heat as you work, sometimes too much. Sweat gathers, then cools, leaving you damp if you pause too long. You learn when to remove layers and when to endure discomfort. Removing too much invites chill. Leaving too much invites exhaustion. Balance is learned through small mistakes. By midday, the sun warms your back and the fabric softens slightly. You smell yourself not unpleasantly, but distinctly human. Everyone does. Perfume exists, but it is rare and reserved for special occasions. Everyday life smells like earth smoke animals and bodies doing what they must. You accept this without commentary. Mending happens constantly. In the evening, hands work needle and thread almost automatically. Tears are closed before they grow. Buttons are replaced with whatever matches closely enough. Children learn these skills early. Scholars continue to debate how much of colonial domestic labour was invisible precisely because it never stopped. Clothing survives only through constant attention. At night, when you undress, the weight lifts. You hang garments carefully, not to preserve beauty, but to let them dry and rest. Damp wool invites sickness, or so many believe. You smooth fabric with your hands, noticing where it thins, where another patch will soon be needed. Clothing ages alongside you, marking time quietly. When you lie down again wrapped in familiar layers, you feel protected and constrained at once. These clothes have carried you through fields, kitchens, workshops, and cold mornings. They announce who you are without speaking. Tomorrow they will do it again, and you will pull them on without hesitation, grateful for what they offer, resigned to what they deny. Hunger does not arrive here as a dramatic sensation. It settles in quietly, a steady reminder rather than a sharp complaint. By the time you feel it clearly, you are already moving to address it. Food in colonial America is not about pleasure or choice. It's about timing, availability, and knowing exactly how much you can afford to use today without regretting it tomorrow. You begin preparing the day's main meal early, often before the work outside fully claims your attention. The kitchen area is simple, sometimes nothing more than a cleared space near the hearth. Cast iron pots hang within reach, blackened from years of smoke. Wooden bowls bear the marks of constant use, their surfaces smoothed by hands rather than tools. Everything smells faintly of fire, even when nothing is cooking. One well-documented reality of daily life is that most meals revolve around grains. Cornmeal appears again and again in different forms. Porridge in the morning, bread or mush later. Sometimes baked, sometimes boiled, sometimes fried if fat is available. Wheat exists, but it is less common in many regions, harder to grow, harder to grind. Corn survives where other crops fail, and so it becomes the backbone of survival. You stir slowly, watching steam rise. The sound is gentle, rhythmic, almost soothing. Food preparation takes time, and rushing it risks waste. Meat, when you have it, is treated carefully. Salted pork, dried beef, or fish, preserved months earlier, are added sparingly. Fresh meat is a rarity unless hunting has gone well or an animal has reached the end of its usefulness. Nothing is taken lightly when it comes from a living body. A small but telling habit of the time is how leftovers are handled. There is no concept of throwing food away simply because it is old. Yesterday's meal becomes today's ingredient. Bread hardens, then becomes thickener for stews. Bones simmer into broth. Fat is saved, strained, reused. Even scraps find purpose. Waste feels almost sinful, even if religion never enters the thought. As you eat, you notice the texture more than the flavour. Food is filling, heavy, designed to sustain labour rather than delight the senses. Sweetness is rare enough to feel almost startling when it appears. Honey, molasses or preserved fruit turn an ordinary meal into something quietly memorable. Children remember those moments for years. Adults pretend not to, but they do. There is no fixed meal schedule in the modern sense. Eating bends around work. You take nourishment when you cannot, when a clock suggests you should. Sometimes that means a quick bite standing near the hearth. Other times it means eating late hands, aching body-tired appetite, finally catching up with effort. Interpretations remain divided on how balanced these diets truly were. Some records suggest colonists consumed more vegetables than often assumed, especially in warmer months. Others emphasize the monotony and seasonal gaps that led to deficiencies. From where you stand, the truth feels simpler. You eat what grows, you eat what lasts, you eat what keeps you moving. Outside fields dictate future meals. Gardens are small, but essential planted close to the house, so they can be watched, protected and accessed quickly. You know which plants mature early and which must wait. You understand how much to harvest without damaging tomorrow. This knowledge is practical, learned by doing, passed down without ceremony. An unusual custom in some households is the use of communal bowls. Multiple people eat from the same dish, each careful not to overreach. It creates an unspoken rhythm, a shared awareness of limits. Children learn early to read these cues. Taking too much brings more than hunger later. It brings quiet judgment now. Food also marks status, though subtly. A table with white bread instead of coarse brown, butter instead of animal fat, meat more than once a week. These details speak quietly but clearly. Yet even the well-fed remain cautious. Famine memory lingers in stories, in habits, in the way cupboards are checked more often than necessary. As the day wears on, hunger returns, not sharply but persistently. You accept it as part of the background. There is always another task to finish before stopping, always another reason to wait. When you finally eat again, often near dusk, the meal feels earned. Warmth spreads through your body, easing stiffness, slowing your thoughts. Documentation becomes less clear when it comes to emotional relationships with food. Diaries mention meals, shortages and harvests, but rarely pleasure. It's difficult to know whether satisfaction went unrecorded or simply felt unremarkable. Sitting there now, chewing slowly, you feel both gratitude and restraint. Enough is enough. More would be wasteful. As night approaches, cooking winds down, pots are cleaned carefully, ashes are banked, remaining food is covered, stored high or sealed as best as possible. Pests are relentless, and a single careless night can undo weeks of effort. You check everything twice, not from anxiety, but from habit. When you finally lie down, your stomach is full, but not heavy. The food has done its job. It will carry you through sleep and into the next morning. Tomorrow, the same quiet calculation will begin again. What to eat? What to save? What can be spared? In this world, survival tastes plain, steady, and reliable, and that is enough. Thirst makes itself known earlier than hunger, especially once the day's labour begins. Your mouth dries quickly as you work, dust clinging to the air and to your skin. You think about water often, not with panic, but with constant awareness. What you drink here is never casual. Every sip carries a quiet calculation about safety, effort and trust. You move toward the nearest source with practiced familiarity. Wells are common, but not always close. Buckets creak as they rise rope rough against your palms. The water looks clear enough, but clarity does not guarantee safety. A reality preserved in countless letters and records is that clean drinking water is not a given in the colonies. Contamination from waste animals or flooding is a constant concern, even if the cause is not fully understood. Because of this uncertainty, fermented drinks appear far more often than modern minds expect. Small beer, weak in alcohol, but boiled during preparation, becomes a daily staple. It hydrates and soothes without inviting illness, at least most of the time. Children drink it. Elders drink it. No one treats it as indulgence. It is simply reliable. An odd practice that raises modern eyebrows is how rarely water is consumed on its own in some households. Instead, it is mixed, boiled, or transformed. Herbal infusions appear as well, sometimes chosen for flavour, sometimes for supposed health benefits. Sage mint, or whatever grows nearby, finds its way into cups. Belief and necessity blend easily. You take a drink slowly, feeling the coolness spread. It tastes faintly of minerals, earth carried from deep below. The bucket is heavy even when full, and carrying it back reminds you that hydration requires effort. Nothing here arrives effortlessly. Every comfort demands participation. There is no full agreement among researchers about how often colonists understood the connection between contaminated water and disease. Some evidence suggests practical awareness without scientific explanation. People noticed patterns even if they could not name causes. You do not drink from certain places. You avoid stagnant pools. You trust some wells more than others. Knowledge passes quietly, reinforced by experience rather than instruction. As the day grows warmer, you drink more often. Sweat runs down your back beneath layers of wool. You pause when you can, lifting a cup or ladle, wiping your mouth with your sleeve. No one comments. Thirst is universal. The sound of liquid pouring becomes familiar, comforting in its own way. Milk appears sometimes, but it spoils quickly. Without refrigeration, it is consumed fast or turned into butter or cheese. Even then, caution rules. Sourness is judged by smell, texture, memory. You learn to trust your senses deeply. They keep you alive more reliably than written advice. Travel complicates everything. When you move beyond familiar ground, water becomes unpredictable. Streams look inviting, but you hesitate. You remember stories of sickness following careless drinking. Some choose to carry small amounts of beer or cider instead, despite the weight. It feels safer even if it slows you down. Accounts from the period mention moments of intense thirst during summer work or long journeys. These descriptions are often brief, but the discomfort lingers between the lines. Scholars have noted how rarely hydration appears in grand historical narratives despite its daily importance. Standing here, lifting another cup, you understand how easily such details fade from record. At communal gatherings, drinking becomes social, cups are shared, vessels pass from hand to hand. This closeness feels normal, though illness sometimes follows. When it does, explanations vary. Bad air, divine testing, seasonal weakness. The record grows thin here, scattered between belief and observation. As evening approaches, you drink less. Cooler air reduces demand. You are mindful not to wake in the night, thirsty, knowing how disruptive that can be. The final cup is taken deliberately, neither too much nor too little. Balance is learned slowly through trial and discomfort. When darkness settles, containers are covered, stored carefully. Animals are kept away. A spilled bucket is more than inconvenience. It is lost effort, lost safety. You glance once more at the water source before heading inside, reassured by its presence, aware of its limits. Lying down later, your throat feels calm. You do not think about hydration in abstract terms. You think about wells that never run dry, about streams you trust, about the weight of a full bucket and the relief of an empty cup. Tomorrow thirst will return, and you will meet it the same way, with caution, habit, and quiet respect. Work does not wait for full daylight. It begins as soon as the body is warm enough to move without stiffness. You step outside with purpose, settling into your limbs, not excitement, not dread, just acceptance. Labour here is not something you switch on and off. It's a constant state, shaping posture, pace, even thought. The first tasks are small but necessary. Animals are checked. Tools are gathered. Something always needs repair. A fence rail loosened overnight. A handle cracked from yesterday's strain. These minor details matter because ignoring them compounds trouble. One overlooked weakness can steal hours later, or worse, bring injury. Surviving accounts from the period make it clear that most colonists work far longer hours than modern schedules would tolerate. Sunrise to sunset is common, especially during planting and harvest seasons. Breaks exist, but they are brief and purposeful. Rest is something you earn in fragments, not something you plan for in advance. You move into the rhythm quickly. Muscles warm, breathing settles, repetition takes over. Whether you are in a field, a workshop, or a household space, the work demands focus. Mistakes cost time, materials, sometimes blood. Carelessness is not dramatic, just expensive. Children appear alongside adults early in the day. They are not supervised in the modern sense. They are integrated. Carry this. Hold that. Watch and learn. Childhood blends into usefulness almost seamlessly. A telling detail found in household records is how early children are assigned regular duties, sometimes as young as 5 or 6. No one marks this transition, it simply happens. As the sun climbs, heat builds beneath your clothing. You adjust layers when you can, wiping sweat from your face with the back of your hand. Hands become rough quickly. Splinters are common. Small cuts go unnoticed until evening. Pain is measured differently here. If it does not stop you, it does not count. There is pride in good work, though it is rarely spoken. A straight furrow, a well-fitted joint, bread that rises properly. These results bring quiet satisfaction. Praise when given is brief. Excessive recognition feels unnecessary, even suspicious. Everyone is expected to contribute competently. Excellence is appreciated but not celebrated loudly. Disagreements happen often about effort. Someone moving too slowly, someone taking too many pauses. Labour is visible and judgment follows naturally. Yet there is also cooperation. Heavy tasks require many hands. Neighbours assist when needed, knowing the favour will return. This exchange keeps communities functioning. Researchers remain divided on how much choice individuals truly had in their work. Some suggest a surprising degree of autonomy, especially among skilled tradespeople. Others point to economic pressure and limited opportunity that narrowed paths sharply. From within the day, the question feels abstract. You do what needs doing. Choice matters less than completion. By midday, fatigue creeps in. Movements slow slightly. Concentration wavers. You eat when you can, standing or sitting briefly, then return to the task. The body adapts to this cycle. learning how to conserve energy without stopping completely. Stillness invites stiffness. Motion keeps you functional. Women's labour blends seamlessly into this landscape, often without distinction. Cooking, cleaning, mending, childcare, food preservation and fieldwork overlap constantly. There is no clear boundary between domestic and productive work. Later observers struggle to categorise this labour because it resists separation. Here it simply exists. An unusual but documented habit is the way people talk while working. Conversation flows easily during repetitive tasks. Stories are shared. News is exchanged. Silence settles only during moments requiring precision. Work becomes social, binding people together through shared exertion. Loneliness is rare privacy, rarer still. As afternoon stretches on, shadows lengthen. You feel the accumulated weight of the day in your back and hands. Yet there is comfort in this tiredness. It signals usefulness. It tells you that you have done what was required. Those who avoid labour stand out quickly and not kindly. Weather shifts always demand attention. A sudden cloud cover changes plans. Rain threatens drying grain or open work. Wind carries warning. You watch the sky instinctively adjusting pace and priorities. Flexibility becomes a survival skill learned through loss. Toward evening, work tapers rather than stops. Tools are cleaned, stored, covered. Animals are settled. Loose ends are secured. This transition matters. Ending the day properly prevents tomorrow from starting in chaos. You move carefully now, slower but more deliberate. The body hums with exhaustion, but also familiarity. This is the feeling you know best. It carries into the evening, softening your thoughts, narrowing your focus. Worry fades temporarily under physical weariness. Sleep will come easier tonight because you have earned it. As you head back towards his shelter, the work does not leave you behind. It lingers in sore muscles, in dirt under fingernails, in the quiet awareness that tomorrow will ask for the same commitment. You do not resent this repetition. It shapes you steady and unremarkable, like the land itself. Children are already awake long before anyone thinks to check on them. They rise with the same light that pulls adults from sleep, slipping quietly from bedding, already aware of what the day expects. There's no clear line where childhood ends and responsibility begins. It simply thins gradually until usefulness replaces play without ceremony. You watch them move through the morning with practiced familiarity. Small hands carry items that seem too heavy. Feet move quickly over uneven ground. Instructions are short, sometimes no more than a glance or a gesture. Learning happens by imitation, first correction, second. Mistakes are tolerated only briefly. Repetition sharpens skill faster than explanation ever could. Household records from the era repeatedly show children contributing to daily labour at remarkably young ages, fetching water, feeding animals, gathering kindling. These tasks are not framed as lessons, they are necessities. A child who can help is expected to help. Idleness draws attention quickly, and not the kind that ends gently. Despite this, children do find moments of play. They carve toys from scraps of wood. They chase one another between chores. Laughter breaks out suddenly and disappears just as fast when work calls again. These moments feel intense because they are brief. Joy here does not sprawl, it flashes. Education exists but unevenly. Some children attend local schools for short periods, usually during seasons when labour demands ease. Others learn entirely at home, absorbing reading, writing and arithmetic when time allows. Books are scarce and valued. A child learning letters might practice on scraps, chalking shapes again and again until they settle into memory. There is ongoing discussion among scholars about how widespread formal literacy truly was among colonial children. Some evidence suggests higher rates than once assumed, especially in New England. Other sources point to deep regional differences shaped by economy, religion, and access. From within the household, the issue feels less academic. Learning matters only insofar as it serves life. Discipline is firm and often physical. This is not cruelty in the eyes of the time, but preparation. Adults believe they are shaping resilience, not breaking spirit. A child who learns to endure correction is thought better equipped to endure the world. Affection exists, but it is quieter than modern expectations. It shows in protection, not indulgence. Illness changes everything. Children fall sick often and outcomes are uncertain. Families brace themselves for loss, even as they hope for recovery. One small detail noted in personal letters is how parents often delay naming infants, formally waiting until survival feels more assured. Names carry weight and attachment follows cautiously. When children work alongside adults, they are not shielded from hardship. They see exhaustion, they see injury, they see death. This exposure accelerates maturity in ways difficult to measure. Fear becomes familiar, not overwhelming, simply present. Courage grows not from absence of danger, but from constant proximity to it. At the same time, children absorb community values quickly. They learn who is reliable, who is lazy, who helps quietly, and who complains loudly. Reputation shapes opportunity, and children feel this early. A well-regarded family casts a long shadow, offering protection and expectation in equal measure. A quietly unusual behaviour emerges in some households during winter evenings. Children gather near elders, listening to stories told without books or scripts. Tales mix memory, caution, and imagination. These stories teach as much as any lesson. They warn against arrogance. They celebrate cleverness. They explain the unexplainable in ways that comfort rather than clarify. The record becomes thinner when it comes to children's inner lives. Diaries mention tasks completed, illnesses survived, lessons learned. Rarely do they linger on feelings. What remains is suggestive rather than conclusive. Yet standing here, watching a child pause briefly before returning to work, you sense a depth that words never captured. As children grow, expectations shift subtly. Older boys take on heavier physical labour. Older girls shoulder increasing domestic responsibility. These divisions are not always rigid, but they are persistent. Skills develop accordingly. Strength here is measured less by independence than by contribution. By adolescence, many are already functioning as adults in all but name. They manage tasks unsupervised. They make decisions with real consequences. The future arrives early and without warning. Marriage work, contracts, apprenticeships, all hover close, not distant milestones, but immediate possibilities. Even so, traces of childhood remain. A carved whistle tucked into a pocket, a habit of skipping a step when no one is watching, a grin exchanged between siblings during shared effort. These small remnants matter. They soften a world that rarely pauses to accommodate gentleness. As evening settles, children slow with the rest of the household. They eat wash quickly, if water allows, then settle into shared sleeping spaces. Fatigue claims them fast. Bodies that have worked since morning rest deeply, even if sleep remains light and alert. Watching them drift off, you understand that growing up here is not a process guided carefully forward. It is a current that pulls steadily, shaped by necessity more than intention. Childhood does not disappear. It compresses, making room for endurance, competence, and quiet strength long before the world would consider them ready. Marriage enters your life less like a sudden turning point and more like another responsibility quietly added to the pile. It is discussed early, sometimes long before affection has a chance to form. Conversations happen in low voices, often between parents, neighbours, or community elders. You may be present but rarely centred. The question is not who stirs your heart, it is who can share the weight of living. From surviving correspondence and church records, it becomes evident that marriage in colonial America functions primarily as an economic and social partnership. Two people together can produce more, endure more, and risk less than one alone. Land must be worked. Children must be raised. Illness must be survived. Marriage offers a structure sturdy enough to hold all of that. You learn quickly that love, if it arrives, is expected to grow after commitment, not before. Romance exists, but it is treated cautiously like something pleasant but unreliable. Passion does not plough fields or preserve food. Compatibility matters more. Temperament, health, reputation. A steady nature is valued over charm every time. Courtship, when it happens, is practical and supervised. Meetings occur in shared spaces, often with others nearby. Conversations focus on work habits, beliefs, and future plans. Silence is not awkward, it is informative. A person who sits comfortably in quiet is often considered a good match for long winters and harder years. An easily missed custom of the time is the practice of bundling, especially in colder regions. A courting couple might share a bed fully clothed, separated by boards or heavy blankets to conserve warmth while talking late into the night. This arrangement unsettles modern sensibilities, but it reflects the constant negotiation between necessity and propriety. Whether it always remained as innocent as intended remains uncertain. Interpretations diverge on how much agency young people truly held in choosing their partners. Some sources suggest families exerted heavy influence, steering matches carefully. Others reveal moments of quiet defiance where individuals married for affection despite disapproval. From within the moment, choice feels present, but narrow-shaped by survival rather than rebellion. Once married roles settle quickly, expectations are clear even if they are not always spoken aloud. Labour is divided but not evenly. Tasks overlap constantly. A successful household depends on cooperation more than hierarchy, even when authority is formally assigned. Conflict arises, of course, but it is rarely dramatised. There is too much to do. Women often bring skills into marriage that determine a household's success. Food preservation, textile production, medical knowledge passed down through experience. Men bring labour, land, or trade skills. These contributions are weighed carefully. Marriage is less about merging hearts than merging capabilities. Children arrive early and often. Spacing is unpredictable, shaped by health circumstance and chance. Pregnancy is treated as both ordinary and dangerous. Women continue working through much of it, slowing only when necessary. Community support appears in practical forms rather than sentiment. Meals delivered, chores shared, silence respected. Loss is never far away. Infant mortality remains high. Couples learn not to celebrate too early, not to plan too far ahead. Grief is real but restrained. Mourning happens alongside continued labour. Life does not pause to accommodate sorrow, no matter how heavy it feels. A quietly revealing habit within marriages is how little couples speak about emotional satisfaction. Diaries mention harvests, debts, illnesses, and births far more often than happiness or disappointment. What remains unsaid may matter as much as what is recorded. Evidence thins when it comes to inner lives, leaving modern readers to infer from action rather than confession. As years pass, partnership deepens through shared endurance. You learn each other's rhythms. Who rises first? Who notices problems early? Who carries worry silently? Affection shows itself in small adjustments. A task taken over without comment. A cup set within reach. A blanket pulled higher during the night. Disputes occur sometimes fiercely. Voices raise. Doors close sharply. But reconciliation is practical. Separation is rarely an option. Economic survival depends on staying together. Even unhappy marriages often persist, bound by necessity more than hope. The idea of fulfillment takes a different shape here, defined by stability rather than joy. Community watches marriages closely. Harmony reflects well. Conflict invites scrutiny. Neighbours notice absences, tensions, changes in routine. Privacy remains thin. Support and judgment arrive together, inseparable. A couple's success or failure ripples outward, affecting reputation and opportunity. As the household grows older, marriage becomes less about effort and more about habit. Movements align. Decisions happen without discussion. You share space efficiently, almost unconsciously. Love, if present, has softened into familiarity. If absent, respect and routine fill the gap. At night, lying beside another person, you feel the weight of shared life pressing gently but constantly. Another body breathing near you is reassurance. Someone else will wake when you cannot. Someone else will carry on if you fall ill. Marriage here is not a promise of happiness. It is a mutual agreement to endure. As sleep comes, you understand that partnership in this world is less about being seen and more about being useful to one another. Tomorrow will ask the same of both of you, and together quietly you will answer. You begin to notice how much of the day's motion depends on work that rarely receives a name. It happens in the background, steady and persistent, shaping outcomes without drawing attention. Much of this labour belongs to women, though it is rarely described that way at the time. It is simply considered part of how life functions, like weather or daylight. From the moment morning begins, women are already moving. Fires are checked. Food is prepared. Children are directed, corrected and reassured all at once. Hands are almost never still. If they are not cooking, they are cleaning. If not cleaning, then sewing. If not sewing, then tending gardens, animals, or the sick. Tasks overlap constantly, leaving little room to distinguish one role from another. Household inventories from the period reveal how much production happens inside the home itself. Cloth is spun and woven, soap is made, candles are poured, clothing is constructed, repaired, resized and repurposed. These activities save money and ensure survival, yet they are rarely counted as economic contribution in formal records. Still, without them, households collapse quickly. You feel the pace of this work in the body, standing for long stretches, bending repeatedly, lifting heavy pots, carrying water. Fatigue settles in quietly and stays. Rest happens in fragments stolen between tasks rather than scheduled. Sitting feels indulgent unless hands remain busy. Childbearing weaves through everything. Pregnancy does not remove responsibilities. It alters them slightly, but rarely enough to offer true relief. Women continue working as long as they are able, slowing only when forced by the body. After birth, recovery is brief. Infants are incorporated into daily motion, carried, fed, soothed while work continues. There is disagreement among modern interpreters about how much autonomy women exercised within this structure. Some point to legal and social restrictions that sharply limited independence. Others highlight the practical authority women held within households, managing resources and labour with significant influence. Standing here, the distinction feels blurred. Power exists, but it is situational and often invisible. Knowledge passes through women's hands constantly. Recipes, remedies, midwifery techniques, preservation methods. This information is shared orally, refined through experience rather than instruction. A quietly strange practice in some communities involves women exchanging small samples of remedies or food preparations, testing effectiveness through trust rather than theory. Success spreads. Failure is quietly abandoned. Healthcare rests heavily on this knowledge. When illness strikes, women are often the first responders. They brew teas, apply poultices, monitor symptoms. Professional doctors exist, but access is limited and outcomes uncertain. Care provided at home becomes the primary line of defence. Compassion shows itself in action, not language. Women also anchor social networks. They exchange news offer assistance, coordinate support during illness or childbirth. These relationships sustain communities in ways rarely documented. When conflict arises, women often mediate quietly, smoothing tensions before they escalate. Harmony here is a practical necessity, not a moral ideal. Work extends beyond the household. In farming, families, women labour in fields during busy seasons. In towns, some assist with shops or trades. Widows sometimes run businesses outright, managing property and finances, with competence born of necessity. Such cases appear often enough in records to suggest flexibility, though never without scrutiny. The picture grows less settled when it comes to how women viewed their own labour. Diaries and letters rarely dwell on dissatisfaction, but absence does not equal contentment. Silence may reflect expectation rather than approval. What remains is suggestive rather than definitive, leaving modern readers to piece together intention from routine. As the day winds down, women's work does not end. Evening brings more preparation, food for tomorrow, clothing for repair, tools to clean, children to settle. Only when others sleep does the pace finally slow. Even then, hands often continue moving by habit alone. You watch how exhaustion settles differently here. It's not dramatic. It does not demand recognition. It simply accumulates, shaping posture and movement over years. Strength becomes quiet and internal, measured by endurance rather than display. At night, lying down at last, you feel how much has been carried without announcement. The day holds together because of countless small actions completed without pause. Tomorrow will ask for the same, and without complaint or ceremony, that work will resume steady and unseen, holding the world in place, one task at a time. By now you have learned that being a man in this world is less about ambition and more about containment. Expectations sit heavily on your shoulders, shaping how you speak, how you move, even how you stand in the presence of others. Strength is assumed, competence is required, failure is noticed quickly, and remembered longer than success. From an early age, boys are taught to manage themselves before they are taught to lead anyone else. Emotion is not forbidden, but it is expected to stay controlled, practical, and brief. Anger may appear during work or conflict, but lingering displays are frowned upon. Tears are rare, not because sorrow is absent, but because showing it openly feels unsafe. Reputation depends on restraint. Much of male identity centers on provision. You are measured by your ability to produce, protect, and persist. Whether through farming trade or skilled labor, your worth is tied closely to output. A poor harvest, an unsuccessful season, or an injury that limits work can quietly erode standing within the community. Sympathy exists, but it does not replace expectation. Authority comes bundled with obligation. As a husband or father, you're expected to guide household decisions, yet those decisions rely heavily on information gathered and managed by others. Leadership here is not loud. It shows itself in consistency, in being present, in handling disputes without spectacle. Men gather together often, but rarely for leisure alone. Conversation happens alongside labour repairs or shared tasks. When they do sit, it is usually with purpose, to discuss land boundaries, to exchange news, to settle disagreements. Silence is comfortable in these settings. Words are used sparingly, but when spoken they carry weight. There is a curious contrast in how authority operates publicly and privately. In public spaces, men project certainty. At home, decisions may be quietly adjusted through discussion, compromise, or habit. The record does not always reflect this nuance, focusing instead on formal roles. Daily life tells a more layered story. Physical endurance becomes a kind of language. You recognize it in others by posture and pace. A man who keeps moving despite pain earns respect without asking for it. Complaints, when voiced, are often disguised as humour or understatement. This shared understanding creates bonds, but it also isolates those who struggle. Conflict between men is not uncommon, but it follows unspoken rules. Disputes may flare during negotiations or labour disagreements, but outright violence is less frequent than later stereotypes suggest. Reputation matters too much. A man known for losing control risks exclusion, legal trouble, or lasting distrust. Legal authority reinforces these expectations. Men are typically held accountable not only for their own actions, but for those within their households. This responsibility extends beyond intention. If something fails under your care, explanation may matter less than outcome. The burden is quiet but constant. Work provides structure that emotion cannot. When uncertainty arises, you return to tasks you know how to complete. A fence can be repaired. A tool can be sharpened. These actions restore a sense of order. Many men rely on this rhythm to manage fear, grief, or doubt without naming it. Friendship exists, though it rarely resembles modern intimacy. Loyalty shows itself through assistance rather than confession, helping with harvest, standing witness during disputes, showing up when needed without being asked. These acts say more than shared secrets ever could. As men age, authority shifts subtly. Physical strength wanes, but experience gains value. Older men are consulted, listened to, even deferred to in some matters. Their presence carries weight not because of force, but because they have endured. Survival becomes credibility. Yet aging also brings vulnerability. Illness or injury threatens identity itself. A man who can no longer work faces an uneasy transition. Dependence feels dangerous, even shameful. Communities respond with care mixed with expectation. Support is offered, but independence remains the ideal. At the end of the day, when work slows and bodies finally rest, you feel the accumulation of effort in your bones. Expectations do not lift with nightfall. They settle deeper, becoming part of how you breathe and think. Tomorrow will ask the same things of you without variation or apology. Lying down, you do not reflect on masculinity as a concept. You reflect on tasks completed and those waiting, on whether the household will hold, on whether you have done enough. In this world, being a man is not about becoming something new. It is about remaining steady, useful, and contained even when the ground beneath you shifts. The sound of the church bell reaches you before you see the building itself. It travels farther than voices, farther than footsteps, carrying through fields and trees with a steady authority. It does not ask whether you feel ready. It announces that time now belongs to something larger than your own schedule. Even those who do not attend regularly pause when they hear it, if only to mark the moment. Faith structures the week as surely as daylight structures the day. Sunday arrives with expectation attached. Work slows, though it rarely stops completely. Animals still need care. Fires still need tending, but the rhythm changes. Movements soften. Voices lower. Clothing is adjusted carefully. Saved garments brought out and inspected for cleanliness rather than beauty. Inside the meeting house, space feels different from the rest of your life. Benches are hard. The air is cool. Light filters in sparingly illuminating faces rather than decorations. The building is plain by design. Attention is meant to rest on words, not surroundings. You sit where you are expected to sit, aware of who sits near you and who does not. Religion here is not merely belief. It is surveillance, comfort, instruction, and pressure all at once. Sermons stretch long, testing patience and posture. Messages linger on duty, humility, and consequence. Heaven and hell feel close enough to matter daily. Fear is used deliberately, but so is reassurance. The world is dangerous. Order must be maintained. You listen carefully, not only to the sermon, but to the reactions around you. A cough here, a shifting bench there. Everyone is watching, everyone else quietly measuring attention and reverence. Falling asleep during worship invites judgment that lasts longer than the sermon itself. Presence matters. Outside the meeting house, conversation resumes, but it remains cautious. Sunday is not a day for loud laughter or careless speech. Children are reminded to behave. Adults choose words carefully. News is exchanged, but filtered through propriety. This restraint feels heavy at first, then familiar. Church also functions as a record keeper. Births, marriages, deaths, moral failings. These events are noted, remembered, sometimes announced publicly. Community memory grows from these moments, shaping reputation across generations. Forgiveness exists, but it often follows confession and visible correction. Belief varies more than appearances suggest. Some attend out of conviction, others out of habit, some out of fear of exclusion. Doubt rarely announces itself openly. It circulates quietly, shared only in trusted company. Questions are softened before being voiced. Certainty is valued even when it feels fragile. One quietly revealing practice is how moral instruction extends into everyday behaviour. Dress, speech, leisure, all fall under scrutiny. A person who steps outside accepted norms may find themselves gently corrected, then firmly addressed if behaviour continues. This oversight is not always resented. It offers clarity in an uncertain world. At the same time, faith offers comfort that nothing else quite matches. During illness, prayer gathers people together. During loss, Scripture provides language when ordinary speech fails. You have seen grief eased, if not removed, by shared belief. The structure holds even when individuals falter. Different colonies express faith differently. Some emphasize strict discipline. Others allow more variation. Tension exists between denominations, sometimes openly, sometimes beneath the surface. These differences shape settlement patterns and social bonds. You learn quickly which topics invite debate and which invite silence. As the day progresses, the bell rings again, releasing people back into their routines. Relief mixes with reflection. The weight lifts slightly. Movement returns to normal pace. Children run more freely. Adults resume unfinished thoughts. In the evening, faith remains present but quieter. Prayers are spoken softly. Scripture may be read aloud or remembered silently. The day closes with a sense of having met expectation or fallen short. Either way, tomorrow offers another chance to align yourself properly. Lying down, you feel how belief wraps around daily life, not as a distant concept, but as a constant guide and judge. It shapes fear and hope in equal measure. Sleep arrives with familiar phrases echoing in your thoughts, reminders of duty, consequence, and grace. The bell will ring again soon enough, and you will listen because listening has become part of how you belong. Justice does not live in distant buildings or behind closed doors. It moves through the same streets you walk each day, carried by familiar faces and spoken in voices you recognize. Law here is not abstract. It is personal, immediate, and impossible to ignore. When something goes wrong, everyone feels the tremor. You learn early what is permitted and what is not. Not by reading statutes, but by watching consequences unfold in public. Rules are repeated aloud often enough that they sink in. Children absorb them before they understand why they exist. Adults obey them not only out of fear, but because order keeps fragile communities intact. When accusations arise, they travel quickly. A missing item, a broken agreement, a careless word spoken too loudly. News spreads faster than explanation. By the time you hear of it, opinions have already formed. Silence can feel like guilt. Defense must be careful, measured, respectful. Anger rarely helps. Local courts meet in modest spaces, sometimes in taverns or meeting houses. The setting feels ordinary, which makes the proceedings feel heavier rather than lighter. Authority wears familiar clothing. Judges are neighbours chosen for reputation rather than legal training. Their decisions carry weight because they will continue living among those they judge. Punishments aim less at removal and more at correction. Fines are common paid in money, goods, or labour. Public apology carries real force. Being required to stand before the community and admit fault can linger longer than physical discomfort. Shame here is not subtle. It is a tool used deliberately. Stocks and pillories sit in visible places, reminders rather than curiosities. You pass them often enough that they fade into the landscape until someone occupies them. Then attention snaps back sharply. Crowds gather. Some watch in silence. Others whisper or laugh. The experience is meant to sting emotionally as much as physically. Records from town meetings show that many offences involve behaviour rather than violence. Drunkenness, gossip, neglecting communal duties, speaking out of turn. These actions threaten cohesion more than safety, and so they draw swift response. The goal is to restore balance, not merely to punish. There is debate among later commentators about how fair these systems truly were. Authority could be uneven, bias crept in quietly. Those with strong reputations received gentler treatment. Outsiders felt pressure more keenly. Justice here reflects the community itself with all its strengths and flaws intact. Women face particular scrutiny. Their behaviour is watched closely, especially regarding speech and morality. A reputation once damaged is difficult to repair. Men face consequences too, but expectations differ. These patterns are rarely questioned openly. They are reinforced through repetition rather than argument. Children are not exempt. Discipline reaches them publicly when needed. The intention is instruction, not cruelty, but the effect can be lasting. Fear teaches quickly, so does example. A child who witnesses punishment learns where boundaries lie without being told. Not all enforcement feels harsh. Mediation plays a role. Elders intervene quietly when disputes can be resolved without spectacle. Apologies offered early prevent escalation. Compromise is valued when it preserves harmony. Formal punishment becomes necessary only when informal correction fails. Imprisonment exists, but it is limited and uncomfortable. Jails are small, poorly heated, and used briefly. Long-term confinement is impractical in a labour-dependent society. Removing a working body harms everyone. Physical punishment, fines, or public correction fit the system better. As you move through daily life, awareness of law becomes background noise. You adjust behaviour automatically. Words are chosen carefully. Promises are kept, or at least renegotiated openly. Reputation becomes currency, again reinforced through visible adherence to norms. At times justice feels harsh, at others insufficient. You watch someone punished and feel uneasy, unsure whether the response fits the offence. You watch another escape consequence entirely and note the imbalance. These observations settle quietly. Complaints remain private. At night, when streets empty and voices fade, law feels distant for a moment. You breathe more freely, yet even then it remains present, shaping thought and habit. Tomorrow the same rules will apply. You will follow them not because you admire them, but because order allows life to continue with fewer surprises. Lying down, you think about how easily you could stand where others have stood. A mistake, a misunderstanding, a poorly chosen word. The margin for error feels thin. Sleep comes with caution woven into it, a reminder that belonging here requires constant attention. Justice may sleep, but it never disappears. You learn quickly that nothing here stays private for long. Walls are thin, paths cross often, lives overlap by necessity. Even when you think you are alone, someone has noticed where you went, how long you stayed, and what you carried back with you. This awareness settles into daily life until it feels as natural as breathing. Mornings begin with small exchanges, a nod while passing, a brief comment about weather or work. These moments are not idle. They are checks. Who looks tired? Who looks anxious? Who seems unusually quiet? Information moves through the community without effort, carried by observation more than conversation. Neighbours appear when you need them, sometimes before you ask. A fence goes up faster with many hands. A field is cleared more quickly when others arrive uninvited but expected. Help comes with memory attached. You feel gratitude mixed with awareness. This will be repaid. Balance matters. At the same time, attention cuts both ways. Absence is noticed. A door unopened too long raises concern or suspicion. A mist gathering invites quiet speculation. Even illness becomes public knowledge quickly. Care arrives, but so does commentary. Everyone knows what is happening, even if no one speaks it aloud. Disputes rarely remain contained. A disagreement between two people draws in others almost automatically. Opinions form. Sides emerge, though they are rarely declared openly. Conflict here is communal by default. Resolution matters not just for those involved, but for everyone who depends on smooth cooperation. You hear stories of those who failed to manage this visibility well. People who withdrew too much. People who spoke too freely. Their names surface in conversation as cautionary examples, not with malice, but with certainty. Behaviour leaves traces long after events fade. One quietly peculiar habit is how generosity is performed publicly. Gifts are offered in visible ways. Assistance is given where it can be seen. This is not pure show. It establishes reliability. A person who helps openly becomes someone others trust. Private kindness exists too, but public kindness builds standing. Space is shared constantly. Wells, roads, work areas. You learn how to occupy these spaces without friction. Who goes first? Who waits? Who speaks? These rules are unwritten but well understood. Breaking them brings immediate discomfort, even if no one names it. Children absorb this social awareness early. They watch adults navigate interactions and imitate what they see. They learn when to speak and when to listen. Which houses feel welcoming, which feel tense. Social education happens quietly through exposure rather than instruction. Even celebrations are communal. Births, weddings, and seasonal milestones bring people together. Food is shared, music appears, laughter rises, yet even joy is observed. Excess draws attention, restraint earns respect. Balance again becomes the guiding principle. Illness and death tighten these bonds further. Neighbours gather without being asked. Meals arrive, tasks are taken over. Support is practical rather than emotional. Comfort shows itself through action. Words feel inadequate and unnecessary. There are moments when this constant closeness feels heavy. You crave silence, solitude, a space where no one watches. Such places are rare. When you find them, you savour them, briefly aware they cannot last. Isolation invites danger. Togetherness, even when uncomfortable, keeps you safe. Travel offers temporary relief. Time away from familiar eyes feels lighter. Yet returning brings reassurance. You are known here. That knowledge both protects and constrains you. Anonymity has its appeal, but it lacks support. As evening settles, neighbours pass by one last time. Brief conversations mark the day's end. Doors close, lights dim. The village quiets, but awareness does not disappear. You know who is awake, who has gone to bed, who might need help before morning. Lying down, you feel the weight of being seen, measured, remembered. It shapes your dreams as much as your waking hours. Tomorrow you will step back into this shared awareness, navigating it as you always do, carefully, courteously. Because here, survival depends as much on social balance as it does on strength or skill. Illness does not announce itself loudly here. It slips in quietly, disguised as fatigue, a lingering ache, a cough that refuses to fade. You notice it first in small ways. Tasks take longer. Breath feels shallow after work that once felt routine. You tell yourself it will pass because stopping entirely is rarely an option. Care begins at home long before anyone considers seeking outside help. The hearth becomes central again, not just for warmth, but for preparation. Water is heated. Herbs are gathered, dried, crushed, steeped. Knowledge moves from memory to hand without ceremony. You have seen this before many times, and you follow the same steps, now trusting what has worked often enough to feel dependable. Household notebooks and letters suggest a wide range of remedies in regular use. Teas brewed from willow bark for pain, onion syrups for coughs, poultices made from plants, animal fat and cloth applied carefully to skin. Some treatments soothe, others do nothing. A few cause discomfort, but are endured because hope outweighs certainty. The body becomes a site of close attention. Skin is watched for colour changes. Breathing is counted. Appetite is measured carefully. Recovery is judged not by numbers but by movement. If you can rise, if you can walk, if you can work even slowly. Health is defined by function more than feeling. When symptoms worsen, neighbours notice quickly. Absence from routine draws concern. Someone arrives with food with advice, with reassurance, shaped by experience rather than theory. Multiple suggestions may conflict. You listen politely. You choose what feels safest. Trust rests not in authority but in familiarity. Doctors exist, though access varies widely. They arrive on horseback, carrying tools and confidence in equal measure. Their methods include bleeding, purging, and prescribing substances that promise balance. Sometimes improvement follows. Sometimes decline continues. Outcomes are unpredictable enough that households often delay calling for help, weighing cost, distance, and likelihood of success. There remains uncertainty about how much faith people placed in professional medicine versus home care. Accounts suggest a mix of respect and skepticism. You accept assistance when it aligns with your understanding. You hesitate when it feels risky. Experience shapes judgment more than credentials. Illness disrupts more than the body. It interrupts labour, which in turn strains resources. Fields go unattended. Tools remain unused. This creates pressure to recover quickly, sometimes too quickly. You push yourself before strength has fully returned. Relapse follows often enough to be familiar. Children fall ill frequently. Fevers come and go. Rashes appear and fade. Parents monitor closely, alert to signs that signal danger. Some illnesses pass with rest. Others escalate without warning. Loss is not rare. Grief settles into the household alongside continued care for the living. One quietly striking habit involves the sharing of remedies between households. A successful treatment spreads through word of mouth. A failed one disappears without record. Knowledge evolves collectively, shaped by repetition and trust. This informal network functions alongside formal medicine, sometimes in tension, often in parallel. Isolation becomes important during sickness, though understanding of contagion remains incomplete. People notice patterns even if explanations differ. Some illnesses spread rapidly through proximity, others do not. You adjust behaviour accordingly. Visitors limit contact. Utensils are kept separate. Air is thought to carry danger as much as touch. Recovery brings relief, but also caution. Strength returns gradually. Appetite follows. Sleep deepens. You re-enter daily life carefully aware of how easily health can slip away. The memory of weakness lingers, reshaping habits quietly. For those who do not recover, care shifts toward comfort. Pain is eased when possible. Presence matters more than cure. Family gathers. Voices lower. The room grows still. Death arrives often enough that people recognise its approach, even if they never fully accept it. Records from the time rarely dwell on medical success stories. They mention sickness briefly sometimes without detail. Survival is noted. Loss is recorded. The process between remains largely unspoken. What survives is routine, not reflection. As night falls, you rest again, listening to your own breathing. Each inhale feels deliberate. Each exhale brings reassurance. You are aware now of how fragile the balance remains. Health here is not assumed. It is borrowed, renewed daily through care, caution, and luck. Sleep comes slowly, but it comes. The body does its quiet work, repairing where it can. Tomorrow may bring improvement, or it may not. Either way, you will meet it with the same measured attention, guided by habit memory, and the steady presence of those who know what it means to endure illness together. Death is not a distant concept here. It lives close enough to be felt even on ordinary days, woven into conversation, routine, and expectation. You do not wake each morning fearing it, but you are never surprised when it appears. Loss belongs to the same category as weather and illness. It arrives when it arrives, indifferent to readiness. You sense its presence long before it enters your household. Bells toll in a pattern you recognize instantly. Voices lower along the road. Movement changes. Someone pauses longer than usual at your door, delivering news that travels quickly but never lightly. Even before words are spoken, you know what they carry. When death comes closer, the house adjusts around it. Work slows but does not stop. Fires are kept steady. Curtains are drawn. The body is prepared carefully by familiar hands. Washing, dressing, arranging. These actions are done with quiet respect, practiced enough to feel steady even when emotion wavers. There is no spectacle, no urgency to rush. Time bends around the moment. Burial follows swiftly. Waiting serves no purpose. The ground is opened by neighbours who arrive without invitation. Shovels move in rhythm breath, fogging in cool air. No one asks who will help. Everyone knows. Labour continues because it must, even in grief. Funerals are simple affairs. Words are chosen carefully, often from scripture or memory. Eulogies, as modern audiences expect them, are rare. Life is summarised briefly. Names, relationships, a few defining traits. Excessive praise feels inappropriate. Death levels everyone. Modesty follows naturally. Children attend these gatherings standing close to adults, absorbing the ritual without explanation. No effort is made to shield them. Understanding comes through exposure rather than instruction. They learn how to stand, when to be quiet, how long to wait. Death becomes part of the landscape early. Grief shows itself in practical ways. Meals appear. Chores are taken over. Fields are tended by others for a time. Comfort arrives through action, not language. Words often feel inadequate, and so they are used sparingly. Silence fills the space without feeling empty. Mourning practices vary, but restraint is common. Black clothing may be worn, but not always. Jewellery or ribbons mark loss quietly. Excessive display draws discomfort. Endurance is valued. You're expected to carry on even when weight presses heavily. This expectation is not cruel. It is how survival continues. There is uncertainty about how people processed grief internally. Letters mention loss sometimes abruptly, then move on to other matters. Absence of detail does not mean absence of feeling. It suggests a different relationship with expression. Pain is acknowledged, then folded into daily life. Infant and child deaths leave particular marks. Families brace themselves for outcomes they hope will not come, yet prepare for them anyway. Names are reused. Cradles are set aside, then brought back out. These patterns feel strange to modern eyes, but they reflect adaptation rather than indifference. Older age brings a different awareness. Elders often speak openly about their own passing, giving instructions, settling affairs, offering advice. Death becomes a topic of preparation rather than fear. This openness steadies those around them, even as it deepens anticipation. Cemeteries sit close to living spaces. You pass them often, sometimes without noticing. Stones are simple, inscriptions brief. Weather wears away names quickly. Memory becomes communal rather than permanent. Stories keep people alive longer than markers ever could. Night deepens grief in quiet ways. The absence of a familiar presence feels sharper after dark. Sounds once taken for granted no longer arrive. Sleep comes unevenly. Dreams revisit moments without warning. Morning brings continuation, not resolution. Over time, loss reshapes habit. A chair remains empty. Tasks are redistributed. The household learns new rhythms. Life stretches to accommodate absence, then closes around it. Pain softens without disappearing entirely. You understand lying awake that death here is neither hidden nor dramatized. It is accepted as part of the cost of living. Tomorrow will still demand effort. Fields will still need tending. Children will still need guiding. Carrying on becomes both tribute and necessity. Sleep eventually settles, not because grief resolves, but because the body insists. You rest with the knowledge that life continues forward, shaped by those who are gone as much as by those who remain. In this world, remembering and enduring become the same act practiced quietly, one day at a time. You become aware of it not through explanation, but through arrangement. Who sleeps where? Who eats after? Who speaks only when spoken to? Slavery is not an abstract system here. It is a daily presence visible in posture, routine, and silence. You pass it each morning without ceremony, because ceremony would imply choice. Work begins earlier for some than others. You notice it in the half-light before dawn, figures already moving, while the rest of the household still breathes slowly in sleep. Tasks assigned are not negotiated. They are inherited, repeated, and enforced through habit as much as threat. Commands are brief. Expectations are fixed. Plantations make this structure unmistakable, but even smaller households participate. Enslaved people cook meals they may not fully share. They tend fields whose yield they will never own. They care for children who will one day outrank them without effort. Proximity does not soften the boundary, it sharpens it. You hear names spoken differently, first names only, sometimes nicknames given without consent. Identity is shortened, reshaped to fit ownership. Records list ages, skills, monetary values. Families appear fragmented on paper, scattered across pages that do not acknowledge connection or loss. Violence exists even when it is not visible. The possibility alone organizes behavior. A raised voice, a pause that lasts too long, a glance toward a tool or doorway. Control does not require constant action. It relies on memory and anticipation. There are moments of humanity that do not undo the structure. A shared laugh during work. A favour granted quietly. These moments feel real, but they remain fragile. They depend entirely on mood and circumstance. they can be withdrawn without explanation. Religion is used in conflicting ways. Some enslaved people find comfort in faith, reshaping teachings into quiet resistance and hope. Others hear scripture used to justify obedience. The same words carry opposite meanings depending on who speaks them and who is forced to listen. You notice skills that exceed recognition, farming knowledge refined through experience, craftsmanship that improves tools and structures, medical care offered discreetly to others when official help fails. These contributions hold communities together while remaining uncredited. Family life persists despite constant threat. Partnerships form. Children are raised with care and warning. Parents teach survival alongside affection. They prepare children for a world that will not protect them even as they try to shield them from its worst edges. Movement is restricted but not fully contained. Information travels quietly. Songs carry messages layered beneath rhythm. News passes between quarters, fields, and kitchens. You sense communication happening beyond your understanding, shaped by necessity and caution. Punishment is uneven, sometimes arbitrary. A small act can provoke harsh response. A larger one may pass unnoticed depending on timing and witness. This unpredictability keeps fear alive. It also fosters careful calculation. Resistance takes many forms, not all of them loud. You hear stories though, never officially. Someone who ran and was never seen again. Someone who returned changed. Someone sold suddenly after a disagreement. These stories circulate in fragments, warnings carried without detail. Absence speaks loudly here. Economic comfort rests directly on this labour, even when people avoid naming the connection. Meals arrive, homes remain orderly, crops produce profit. Distance between benefit and suffering is maintained through routine. Habit dulls moral friction. Yet discomfort surfaces unexpectedly. A child asks a question that has no safe answer. A moment of shared exhaustion reveals similarity that hierarchy tries to erase. These moments are quickly smoothed over. Reflection is dangerous when it threatens structure. Legal systems reinforce ownership with paperwork and patrols. Escape is framed as theft. Assistance becomes crime. Even those uneasy with the system learn to comply because consequences ripple outward. Protecting one person risks many others. As night falls, separation becomes clearer. Different sleeping spaces, different levels of safety, different futures. Darkness does not equalize. It deepens division, hiding some lives while exposing others to continued labour and vigilance. Lying down, you feel the weight of this reality pressing unevenly across the household. Silence carries more than rest. It holds restraint, fear, endurance. The day repeats tomorrow, shaped by the same boundaries, enforced by the same assumptions. Sleep arrives slowly uneasy. You sense that this world functions because suffering is organised and normalised. Understanding that does not grant power to change it. It only sharpens awareness. And awareness here must remain quiet if life is to continue without rupture. You are never unaware of indigenous presence, even when no one speaks about it directly. It appears in paths worn long before your house stood there, in place names that do not quite translate, in stories told cautiously always, with a pause before the end. Native neighbours are not distant figures. They are close known and yet rarely understood on equal terms. Trade brings the most regular contact. You see it in the careful exchange of goods laid out on cloth or ground. Furs for tools, corn for metal, information for trust. Conversation moves slowly, measured by tone as much as words. Gestures matter. Silence carries meaning. You learn quickly that rushing signals disrespect. You notice differences in how time is treated. Meetings begin when all parties are present, not when a bell rings. Work unfolds in response to conditions rather than schedules. This approach unsettles some colonists who mistake flexibility for unreliability. Others adapt, recognizing a rhythm shaped by land rather than clock. Clothing draws your eye. Materials differ. Construction reflects movement and climate. Garments are repaired until nothing remains to repair. Decoration holds meaning beyond appearance, marking identity, experience, and connection. You sense that these details speak loudly within indigenous communities, even when outsiders fail to hear them. Relationships range from cooperation to tension, sometimes shifting within a single season. Trade partnerships form and dissolve. Alliances change as circumstances demand. Land sits at the centre of nearly every interaction, though it is rarely discussed in the same terms. What you consider property, others consider responsibility or inheritance tied to use rather than ownership. You hear warnings shared quietly among settlers. Do not travel alone beyond certain points. Do not assume welcome. These cautions are often shaped by fear rather than experience, but fear travels easily. At the same time, you also hear stories of guidance offered, of help given during harsh winters, of lost travellers led back to safety. Communication remains fragile. Misunderstandings arise from language, but also from expectation. Agreements spoken aloud may not carry the same weight as those confirmed through repeated action. Trust builds slowly and erodes quickly. A single broken promise can ripple outward, altering relationships far beyond those involved. Children observe these encounters closely. They absorb caution alongside curiosity. Some learn words from neighbouring languages. Others learn to avoid eye contact entirely. Early impressions settle deeply, shaping how the next generation approaches difference. Violence is never far from these relationships, even when peace holds. You sense it in guarded movements, in the way weapons are carried, not raised, but never far away. Past conflicts linger in memory, shaping present behaviour. Retaliation is expected. Forgiveness feels uncertain. Yet daily life continues alongside this tension. Markets operate. Paths cross. Work happens within sight of one another. Ordinary moments coexist with underlying strain. You learn how to move carefully, choosing when to engage and when to withdraw. You notice how indigenous knowledge influences survival even when credit is rarely given. Crops adapted to local soil, routes through difficult terrain, methods of shelter and clothing suited to weather. These practices filter quietly into colonial life, sometimes acknowledged, often absorbed without comment. At night, stories circulate among settlers that blur fact and fear. Accounts grow sharper with repetition. Details shift. Threats feel closer than they may be. These stories shape policy and behaviour more powerfully than direct experience ever could. Meanwhile, indigenous communities adapt as well. They adjust trade, shift settlements, navigate changing power with strategies that prioritise survival. You glimpse this adaptability in quick decisions and careful observation. Resilience shows itself differently here, but it is unmistakable. As days pass, you come to understand that coexistence is not a single condition. It is a constant negotiation renewed each morning through choice, caution, and circumstance. Peace exists, but it is active rather than assumed. Lying down at night, you think about how close these worlds remain without fully touching. Shared land, shared seasons, separate assumptions. Sleep arrives with this awareness, lingering, not resolved, simply present. Tomorrow will bring another meeting, another exchange, another careful step taken on ground that holds more history than any one person can fully grasp. Money exists here, but it never quite behaves the way you expect it to. Coins appear and disappear, circulate briefly, then vanish into chests or pockets, save for moments when nothing else will do. More often than not, exchange happens without metal ever changing hands. You feel this immediately when you try to assign value to things and discover that value shifts depending on season, need, and relationship. Markets gather in predictable places, though not always on predictable days. People arrive carrying what they have rather than what they plan to sell. Eggs 1 week, wool the next, a repaired tool offered in place of payment, goods spread out on tables, barrels, or the ground itself. Prices are discussed quietly, adjusted by circumstance rather than rule. You learn quickly that trust matters more than exact measure. A promise to deliver grain later can be worth as much as grain today, provided the promise comes from the right person. Reputation travels ahead of transactions, shaping outcomes before words are exchanged. A reliable name smooths negotiation. A questionable one complicates everything. Coins do circulate, but unevenly. British currency appears alongside foreign coins, worn smooth from long travel. Values are adjusted mentally, converted through habit rather than mathematics. Some pieces are clipped or damaged, yet still accepted at reduced worth. You handle them carefully, aware that tomorrow they may be gone again. Paper money exists in some regions, issued by colonial governments to ease shortages. Its value depends entirely on confidence. You watch people accept it cautiously, folding it away with care, knowing it represents trust more than substance. When faith falters, paper becomes little more than kindling. Barter fills the gaps. You trade labour for goods, goods for other goods, time for future favour. This system feels flexible and fragile at once. It works because people remember. Debts attract in minds rather than ledgers. Forgetting feels dangerous. Recalling accurately builds standing. At home, resources are counted constantly, not in formal tallies, but through habit. You know how much flour remains by the weight of the container. You know how much salt is left by how carefully it is used. Scarcity sharpens attention. Abundance relaxes it, briefly, never fully. Travel complicates exchange further. Prices shift with distance. Something common in one place becomes valuable elsewhere simply because it travelled. You see this when traders arrive with goods that feel exotic despite their simplicity. A certain tool, a specific fabric. Access alone creates demand. There is occasional frustration in this system. Disputes arise over fairness. Measurements differ. Memories conflict. Resolution depends less on proof than on relationship. Arguments are settled through compromise or mediation rather than strict accounting. Harmony often outweighs exactness. Children observe these exchanges early. They learn the language of negotiation by watching. They see how tone matters, how patience yields better results than insistence. Economic education happens without instruction, absorbed through repetition. You notice that generosity carries strategic weight. Offering a fair deal, or even a slightly generous one, builds future security. People remember kindness when times grow lean. Hoarding invites suspicion. Sharing invites support. Balance again emerges as the guiding principle. As the day ends, markets thin out. Goods are packed away. Agreements linger in conversation rather than writing. You return home with less than you expected, but enough. Enough feels different here. It means survival without strain, not satisfaction. In the quiet of evening, you reflect on how wealth is measured, not by accumulation, but by stability. A household that eats regularly, a roof that holds, neighbours willing to help. These are the currencies that matter most. You set aside what you gained, knowing it will soon be exchanged again. Nothing stays still for long. Tomorrow brings another opportunity to trade, negotiate and adapt. In this world, value lives not in objects, but in the web of relationships that move them from hand to hand, day after day. Travel does not begin with excitement. It begins with calculation. You stand at the edge of your routine and consider what must be left behind, what must be carried, and what risks cannot be avoided. Distance here is not measured in miles so much as in effort, delay, and uncertainty. Even short journeys require planning that feels excessive by modern standards. You prepare early, food that will not spoil quickly, a cup that can be shared, extra cloth for warmth or bandaging. Everything you bring adds weight, but everything you leave behind invites vulnerability. The balance is never perfect. You adjust and accept that something will be missing when you need it. Roads exist, but barely. Paths are worn by repetition rather than design, winding around obstacles instead of through them. Mud appears suddenly, stones shift underfoot, carts jolt and groan, reminding you that wheels are not suited to every surface. Progress is slow enough that impatience fades out of usefulness. You travel when light allows. Darkness changes everything. Familiar ground becomes uncertain. Sounds feel closer. Direction loses clarity. You aim to reach shelter well before night, knowing that pushing on invites mistakes. When evening approaches too quickly, you weigh options carefully. A known house, a tavern of uncertain quality, a clearing that offers visibility but little comfort. Taverns serve many purposes beyond drink. They offer news, shelter, and a kind of temporary belonging. You enter cautiously reading the room before settling. Who sits where? Who watches newcomers? Who speaks too loudly? Information circulates quickly in these spaces, though accuracy varies. You listen more than you speak. Sleeping away from home feels different. Bedding is unfamiliar. Sounds do not match expectation. You rest lightly, aware that your safety depends on strangers keeping their own order. Even hospitality carries risk. Gratitude mixes with alertness. Weather shapes travel more than intention ever could. Rain turns paths into traps. Snow slows everything to a crawl. Heat drains strength steadily. You adjust pace, constantly stopping when needed, pushing when conditions allow. The land sets terms. You follow. Encounters along the way are brief but memorable. A traveller moving faster than expected. A family paused at the roadside repairing something broken. A rider passing without acknowledgement. Each meeting carries potential. Assistance, exchange, trouble. You judge quickly, guided by instinct, sharpened through experience. Animals share these roads. Livestock driven to market. Horses resting briefly. Wildlife crossing without concern. You learn to read signs left behind. tracks, droppings, broken branches. This awareness keeps you oriented when paths blur. Time stretches during travel. Hours feel longer without familiar markers. You notice small details you would normally ignore. The way trees thin out. The smell of water before it appears. Changes in soil underfoot. Attention shifts outward, grounding you in the present moment. Messages travel with people. Letters are carried carefully protected from moisture and loss. News arrives already shaped by the journey. Delayed, edited, embellished. By the time you hear it, events may have shifted again. Patience becomes necessary. Urgency rarely survives distance intact. Illness and injury pose particular danger away from home. A twisted ankle can halt progress entirely. A fever forces difficult choices. Continue and worsen. Stop and risk exposure. You watch your body closely responding to small warnings before they become demands. When you finally approach your destination, relief mixes with fatigue. Familiar landmarks bring reassurance. The outline of a building, the sound of known voices. Arrival feels earned, not celebrated. You are welcomed, but you are also expected to recover quickly and contribute again. Returning home carries its own adjustments. You re-enter routines that continued without you. Tasks wait. Stories are exchanged. What you learned on the road filters back slowly, shaping conversations and decisions. Travel expands your awareness, but it also reminds you of how much effort stability requires. As night settles after a journey, sleep comes unevenly. Muscles ache. Thoughts replay moments of caution and choice. You feel both small and capable. The world stretches wider than your daily path, yet your place within it feels clearer. Tomorrow travel will end, and routine will resume. Fields will need tending, tools will need cleaning, the road will fade back into memory, waiting for the next reason to call you away. In this world, movement is always possible, but stillness remains the goal. You travel to return, carrying with you a quiet understanding of how far effort must reach to connect one place to another. News arrives without ceremony, slipping into your life through ordinary moments. A passing comment at the well, a traveller pausing longer than expected, a letter unfolded carefully at the edge of the table, its creases already softened by many hands. Information moves here at the speed of footsteps, and memory, not urgency. By the time you hear something, it has already been shaped by distance. You learn to listen for tone as much as content. Excitement signals exaggeration. Calm delivery often carries the most weight. People repeat what they believe matters, trimming details that feel uncertain. Each retelling sharpens some edges and smooths others. Truth remains present, but it wears different clothes depending on who carries it. Letters feel precious. Paper is handled gently, edges protected from moisture and flame. Ink fades in places smudged where fingers lingered too long. Reading happens aloud often, even when the words are meant for one person. This sharing is practical. It spreads information efficiently. It also binds listeners together, giving everyone a stake in what is known. Time bends news in quiet ways. An event described as recent may already belong to last season. Decisions made far away reach you after their consequences have begun unfolding. This delay creates space for speculation. People fill gaps with an inference, drawing conclusions from incomplete threads. Sermons carry news too woven into moral instruction. A political shift becomes a warning. A distant conflict becomes a lesson. Clergy choose what to emphasize, shaping understanding through selection rather than explanation. You learn to read between lines, noting what is said loudly and what is barely mentioned. Printed materials appear occasionally. Pamphlets, broadsides, notices posted where many pass. They feel authoritative simply because they exist in writing. Yet you notice how quickly their messages are reinterpreted in conversation. Ink does not fix meaning, people do. Rumours thrive in this environment. They move faster than letters carried by emotion rather than evidence. Some fade quickly, others persist, reshaped by fear or hope. You learn to hold them lightly, neither dismissing nor embracing them fully. Acting on rumour alone feels risky. Children become messengers unintentionally. They overhear fragments, repeat phrases without context. Adults correct them gently or sharply, depending on content. Information management becomes part of upbringing. What to say, what to keep, what to pass along carefully. News affects daily choices in subtle ways. A report of poor harvests elsewhere encourages conservation. A rumour of conflict alters travel plans. A change in leadership shifts conversation, but not routine. Life continues even as understanding adjusts. There's a strange intimacy in this slow circulation. You feel connected to distant places without ever seeing them. Names become familiar. Events feel personal despite separation. This connection lacks immediacy, but it carries weight through repetition. At times, misinformation settles in quietly. A belief takes hold and becomes accepted simply because it has been repeated often enough. Challenging it requires confidence and evidence rarely available. You learn to navigate these currents, carefully choosing when to speak and when to let uncertainty remain. Even silence communicates. The absence of expected news raises concern. A delayed letter invites worry. People notice these gaps quickly. They speculate softly, preparing for outcomes before confirmation arrives. As evening falls, conversation shifts from news to reflection, what it might mean, how it might affect tomorrow. Voices lower. Speculation turns inward. Decisions are postponed until clarity improves, which may take weeks. Lying down later, you think about how knowledge here feels heavier and slower than in imagined worlds. It arrives wrapped in caution. It demands patience. Yet it also offers continuity. You are part of a wider story even if you learn it one step at a time. Sleep comes with fragments of conversation echoing faintly, names, places, possibilities. They drift without urgency, settling into memory. Tomorrow will bring more words, more updates, more reinterpretation. In this world, understanding is never finished. It simply moves forward, carried by voices you trust enough to listen to again. Time here does not move evenly. It stretches and tightens according to season, bending daily life around the demands of the land. You feel this most clearly as the year turns, when habits shift without discussion, guided by weather rather than preference. The calendar matters less than the sky. The soil and the quiet signals your body learns to read. Spring arrives with hesitation. Warmth appears briefly, then retreats. You wait before planting, resisting the urge to rush. A late frost can undo weeks of effort in a single night. You test the ground with your hands, feeling for softness, for readiness. Others do the same, exchanging glances that ask questions without words. When work finally begins, it does so all at once. Days lengthen quickly, Light spills into early morning and lingers into evening. You work longer without noticing at first, carried by momentum. Energy feels renewed even when tasks multiply. There is relief in motion after winter's confinement. Muscles stretch. Tools return to regular use. The land responds slowly, then decisively. Summer compresses time. Heat pushes work into early hours and late afternoons. Midday slows everything. You seek shade when possible, listening to insects fill the air with constant sound. Sweat becomes familiar, expected. Water is consumed more carefully. Storms build suddenly, releasing rain that nourishes and threatens at the same time. Crops demand attention now. Weeding, protecting, watching for signs of trouble. Small changes matter. Leaves curl. Colour shifts. You learn to notice quickly, responding before damage spreads. This vigilance becomes second nature, extending even into sleep. Dreams include weather, growth loss. Autumn arrives with urgency. Harvest cannot wait. Crops must be gathered at the right moment, neither too early nor too late. Everyone works. Children, elders, neighbours, the pace quickens. Long hours return, fueled by the knowledge that winter follows close behind. Food is processed, preserved, stored. Each successful task brings relief, edged with awareness that more remains to be done. The air cools. Breath becomes visible again. Nights lengthen. You feel time opening slightly, allowing moments of reflection between tasks. Yet pressure remains. Nothing stored is truly safe until it is secured against cold moisture and pests. You check supplies repeatedly, counting without numbers, trusting familiarity. Winter narrows time. Days feel shorter. Movement slows. Work turns inward. Repair replaces expansion. You spend more hours indoors, hands busy with maintenance and preparation. Stories surface more often now, filling space left by reduced daylight. Silence deepens. Sound carries farther. Cold changes how you think. Effort feels heavier. Rest feels more necessary. You conserve energy instinctively, choosing tasks carefully. Travel decreases. Visits become more deliberate. Community tightens around shared endurance rather than shared activity. Holidays appear within this cycle, but they bend to seasonal reality. Celebration exists, but it does not interrupt necessity. Feasting happens when food allows. Rituals offer structure, marking progress through the year without altering its demands. Children learn time differently. They measure it through tasks rather than dates. When planting starts, when harvest ends, when snow finally falls. This understanding feels intuitive, grounding them in patterns older than record keeping. As seasons repeat, you develop trust in rhythm. Losses occur, but recovery follows. Abundance fades, but scarcity passes. Nothing remains fixed. This awareness brings patience. You plan less far ahead, focusing on what the land allows now. At night, lying still, you feel where you are in the year without thinking about it. The air tells you, your body tells you. Tomorrow's tasks already suggest themselves. Time here is not something you chase or escape. It carries you steady and indifferent, asking only that you move with it rather than against it. Sleep arrives wrapped in this seasonal awareness. You rest knowing where you stand, between planting and harvest, between cold and warmth. The year continues its quiet turning, and you turn with it one measured day at a time. Shelter here is never something you forget about. Even when it stands quietly doing its job without complaint, you remain aware of its limits. A house is not a refuge from the world so much as a pause between exposures. It keeps out some of the wind, some of the rain, some of the cold, but never all of it. You learn to appreciate what it offers without expecting more. The structure itself tells a story the moment you step inside. Walls are thick where they need to be, thin where they can be spared. Windows are few placed carefully to admit light without inviting too much weather. Floors creak because they are used constantly, not because they are poorly built. Every sound reminds you that the house is alive in its own way, responding to temperature, weight and time. You notice how the house changes throughout the day. Morning light enters at a shallow angle, illuminating dust and smoke that hang in the air. Midday warmth softens wood, slightly easing joints and seams. By evening, cold returns, tightening everything again. The house breathes along with the day, and you adjust to its rhythm instinctively. Rooms serve multiple purposes without apology. A table used for meals becomes a workspace moments later. Beds are cleared during daylight to make space for movement. Storage presses against living areas, tools hanging alongside clothing and food. Nothing is wasted on separation when space itself is precious. Heat defines the centre of the home. The hearth anchors everything. You arrange your life around its reach, placing sleeping spaces, work areas, and seating where warmth can be shared. When fire fades, the house feels larger and less forgiving. You tend it carefully, knowing how quickly comfort slips away when embers die. Roofs demand constant attention. Thatch must be replaced. Shingles loosen. Leaks appear after heavy rain. You notice stains spreading slowly along beams and know exactly what they mean. Repair happens early before damage multiplies. A neglected roof invites rot, and rot invites collapse. Furniture is sturdy, built to endure rather than impress. Chairs support weight without comfort. Chests hold more than they promise. You learn where each piece belongs, how to move around them in low light without thinking. Familiarity makes the space workable even when it remains crude. Smells linger here. Smoke embeds itself in wood and cloth. Cooking leaves traces that never fully disappear. Dampness settles after rain. These scents mix into something you recognise as home, neither pleasant nor offensive, simply present. Absence of smell would feel wrong. Pests remain constant companions. Mice find gaps. Insects appear with warmth. You set traps, patch holes, accept a level of intrusion as inevitable. Total control is impossible. Management becomes the goal, not elimination. Privacy is negotiated rather than granted. Conversations carry easily. Movements are noticed. You learn when to lower your voice and when silence speaks louder. The house holds everyone together whether they wish it or not. When guests arrive, the space adjusts again. Bedding is shared. Food stretches. Courtesy fills gaps where comfort cannot. Hospitality matters even when resources are thin. Turning someone away feels dangerous, not just socially, but morally. At night, the house settles into its most honest state. Sounds sharpen. Cold creeps in quietly. You listen to wind press against walls, rain testing weak points, animals moving just outside. The house stands between you and all of it, imperfect but essential. Lying down, you feel how much trust you place in this structure each night. It holds. It always has. Tomorrow it will require attention again. A loose board, a draft to block, a repair waiting its turn. Shelter here is not a finished achievement. It is an ongoing conversation between you and the elements, one you answer daily through care, patience and acceptance. Fire shapes your day more than any other force inside the home. It wakes before you do if it has been banked well, and it sleeps only when you allow it to. You approach it with familiarity and caution, knowing how quickly it shifts from comfort to danger. This relationship never relaxes. It demands respect every time you draw near. In the morning, you coax it back to life gently. A breath astir, a careful placement of kindling. Smoke rises first sharp and stinging before flame follows. Your eyes water slightly, and you turn your face away without thinking. Everyone learns this movement early. Fire announces itself through sensation before it offers warmth. The hearth becomes a place of constant return. Meals depend on it. Water warms there. Tools are dried. Light gathers around it after sunset. You measure distance from it, instinctively positioning yourself where heat reaches without overwhelming. Too close and sweat forms even in winter. Too far and cold reminds you how thin the barrier truly is. The fire is never left alone without thought. Before stepping outside, you check it. Before lying down, you adjust it. Embers are banked, carefully covered, just enough to survive the night without flaring. Mistakes here carry consequence. A spark in the wrong place can undo everything. You've seen what happens when control slips. A roof catches. A wall blackens. Smoke fills a room faster than breath can escape. Buckets appear. Shouts follow. Neighbours run without being called. Fires spread quickly in close communities, leaping from house to house, without regard for ownership or effort. The memory of this possibility stays close, shaping every movement around flame. Candles offer light, but they carry risk as well. You place them where they cannot be tipped easily. You extinguish them early, accepting darkness, rather than gambling with safety. Tallow drips onto surfaces, leaving marks that never fully disappear. Light here always leaves a trace. Children are taught fire safety through exposure rather than instruction. They are allowed close enough to feel heat, far enough to avoid harm. They learn quickly what burns feel like, even if only briefly. This knowledge settles deeper than any warning ever could. Cooking requires patience and attention. Pots must be shifted constantly to avoid scorching. Timing depends on sound and smell more than measurement. You listen for simmer. You watch for steam. Fire does not provide even heat unless you make it. Every meal reflects your ability to manage flame effectively. Fire also alters air. Smoke lingers, settling into beams and clothing. You cough sometimes, especially in winter when ventilation decreases. Soot coats surfaces, slowly darkening them over years. Cleanliness becomes relative. You wipe what you can and accept the rest. At night, the fire becomes both comfort and threat. It keeps the cold from settling too deeply. It also demands vigilance. You rise occasionally to check it even when tired. Habit pulls you from sleep before danger does. This interruption feels normal. Deep sleep remains rare when flame remains active. When storms arrive, fire becomes harder to manage. Wind pulls smoke back into the room. Rain dampens fuel. You adjust, constantly responding to changes minute by minute. The elements test your control, reminding you that fire obeys no one fully. Despite the risk, fire brings moments of quiet pleasure. You warm your hands. You watch embers glow steadily. You listen to the soft crack that signals balance rather than danger. These moments feel earned small rewards for careful attention. When illness strikes, fire becomes central again. Water warms for washing. Teas steep slowly. The hearth turns into a place of care. Heat soothes where medicine cannot. Presence matters more than cure, and fire supports that presence through warmth and light. As the day ends, you prepare the fire for rest, just as you prepare yourself. You clear space around it. You ensure nothing can fall or drift too close. You lower its energy without extinguishing it completely. This balance mirrors the one you seek for yourself. Lying down, you feel reassured by its steady glow, even as you remain aware of its potential. Sleep comes with one ear open, attuned to changes in sound and smell. Fire keeps you alive, but only because you keep watch. Tomorrow, you will begin this conversation again. Flame and restraint, heat and caution. In this world, survival depends not on conquering fire, but on learning to live beside it, alert, respectful, and endlessly attentive. Entertainment does not arrive here as an event you prepare for. It slips into the day through pauses, shared effort, and moments when hands are busy but minds are briefly free. Leisure exists, but it rarely announces itself. You recognize it only after it has already passed. Music appears first in simple forms, a voice humming while working, a tune tapped out on a table with a spoon. Instruments are few and treasured, a fiddle kept wrapped in cloth, a flute carved carefully from wood. When music surfaces, people gather without planning. Sound pulls them closer, easing the day's weight without demanding attention. Songs carry memory more than novelty. Lyrics repeat familiar stories. Verses change slightly depending on who sings them. You learn quickly that music here is not about performance. It is about recognition. Joining in matters more than sounding good. Silence during a song feels heavier than a missed note. Stories fill long evenings, especially when cold shortens the day. Someone begins without introduction, a memory, a cautionary tale, a story borrowed from someone else and reshaped through retelling. Children lean closer. Adults listen while mending or carving eyes focused on work, but attention drifting toward the voice. Games appear when energy allows. Cards, when available, pass from hand to hand. Simple contests test strength or balance. Laughter breaks out suddenly, then settles again. Competition remains friendly, rarely escalating. Winning brings brief satisfaction. Losing invites teasing that fades quickly. Reading offers quiet escape for those who can manage it. Books are shared pages worn thin from repeated use. Reading aloud spreads stories further, allowing many to experience what few can own. Words open distant places, though they are always filtered through local understanding. Religious observance overlaps with entertainment more than it separates from it. Singing hymns blends belief with melody. Celebrations follow ritual patterns that include food, sound, and shared presence. Joy feels permitted within structure, contained rather than exuberant. Seasonal gatherings bring more sustained relief. Harvest time invites communal meals. Winter holidays soften hardship briefly. Decorations are modest. Effort focuses on togetherness rather than display. These moments feel brighter precisely because they stand out against long stretches of routine. Children create their own amusements. They chase, invent rules, test boundaries. Toys are simple and often temporary. A carved figure. A ball stitched from scraps. Imagination supplies what materials cannot. Play remains active and brief, folding back into work easily. Humour exists quietly. Jokes rely on familiarity rather than surprise. Teasing signals inclusion. Sharp wit is appreciated, but cruelty is not. Laughter serves to release tension, not create it. You learn when humour heals and when it harms. At times, stillness becomes its own form of leisure. Sitting near the fire, watching embers shift, listening to wind outside. These moments restore energy without movement. You allow yourself to linger, knowing that rest, even brief, strengthens tomorrow. Entertainment ends as gently as it begins. Someone stands. A task resumes. Light fades. There is no applause, no announcement of conclusion. Satisfaction settles quietly, leaving behind a softened mood rather than excitement. Lying down later, fragments of sound and story drift through your thoughts. A melody half remembered, a joke repeated softly. These small pleasures do not distract you from life's demands. They make those demands bearable. Tomorrow will bring work again. But tonight the memory of shared voices and simple amusement rests with you, offering comfort without excess. In this world, entertainment does not remove hardship. It weaves through it, reminding you that endurance feels lighter when carried together. Luxury exists here, but it hides in small places and brief moments. It does not announce itself with abundance. It reveals itself quietly, almost shyly, in contrast to the effort required to obtain it. You learn to recognize these moments instinctively because they feel different in the body, lighter, softer, rare. A clean shirt feels like a gift, not new, just freshly washed and dried in clear air. You notice how it rests against your skin without stiffness or grit. The sensation lasts only until work begins again, but the memory stays longer. Cleanliness, when it appears without strain, feels indulgent. Sweetness counts as luxury too. A spoonful of honey saved for a special moment. Preserved fruit open reluctantly, knowing it will not be replaced soon. The taste surprises you every time, as if your mouth has forgotten what ease feels like. You eat slowly, stretching the moment as far as it will go. A chair with a back that supports rather than merely holds your weight becomes another form of quiet comfort. You sit differently when it is available, allowing muscles to loosen instead of bracing. Most seating here expects endurance. Support feels like generosity. Warmth can be a luxury as well. Not survival warmth, but excess warmth. Standing near the fire without needing to move closer. Letting heat reach your hands without calculation. This kind of warmth signals safety, even if only temporarily. You savour it without speaking. Light sometimes feels extravagant. A room bright enough to read without strain. A candle allowed to burn longer than strictly necessary. You linger in illumination, aware of how quickly darkness usually claims the evening. Seeing clearly becomes a pleasure rather than a function. Privacy is rare enough to feel like wealth when it appears. A moment alone, a walk without company, a task completed without interruption. These instances feel expansive, giving your thoughts room to stretch. You guard them quietly, knowing they cannot be claimed often. Time itself becomes luxurious when it loosens its grip. An afternoon with fewer demands. An evening where nothing urgent presses forward. You move more slowly, almost cautiously, uncertain how long the space will last. This softness does not feel earned, it feels borrowed. Objects sometimes carry luxury simply by lasting. A tool that works smoothly year after year. A blanket that remains intact through many winters. Reliability feels indulgent when replacement is difficult. You treat such items with care that borders on affection. Conversation can offer luxury too, talking without purpose, laughing without restraint, sitting in shared silence without expectation. These moments feel light precisely because they are unnecessary. They exist outside survival, even if only briefly. You notice that luxury rarely accumulates. It appears then fades. Attempting to hold on to it too tightly invites disappointment. You learn to accept it as it comes without chasing repetition. Expectation dulls appreciation quickly. Children recognize luxury instinctively. They linger where comfort appears. They resist returning to effort when ease reveals itself. Adults guide them back gently, knowing that longing for comfort too strongly complicates survival. As night approaches, small luxuries settle into memory. A warm drink, a softer word exchanged, a task finished early. These fragments gather quietly, shaping contentment without excess. Lying down, you feel the contrast most clearly. The bed remains the same, the room unchanged, yet something within you feels eased. Luxury here does not transform life. It punctuates it. It reminds you what effort protects and what endurance allows. Sleep comes wrapped in this awareness. Comfort may be brief, but it is real, and knowing it exists at all makes the weight of tomorrow feel slightly lighter, carried with the memory of softness earned through patience rather than possession. Fear does not arrive as a sudden feeling. It settles gradually, becoming part of how you move through the world. You notice it in small hesitations, a pause before stepping into the woods, a glance toward the sky when wind changes direction. The unknown presses quietly at the edges of daily life, rarely named, always present. The land beyond cleared fields feels different. Trees stand closer together. Light filters unevenly. Sounds travel in unfamiliar ways. You know these woods provide fuel, food, and materials, yet they also hold uncertainty. Paths disappear easily. Landmarks shift. You learn to mark your way carefully, trusting memory and instinct more than maps. Night amplifies this awareness. Darkness erases distance. Familiar shapes dissolve into suggestion. A sound that means nothing by day feels loaded after sunset. You listen longer. You breathe more slowly. Fear sharpens attention even as it tightens the body. Stories circulate about what lies beyond the edges of settlement. Some are grounded in experience. Others grow with repetition. A traveller lost. An animal behaving strangely. A figure seen where no one should be. Details change, but the unease remains consistent. These stories serve a purpose. They teach caution without instruction. Belief weaves itself into this uncertainty. Omens are noticed. Dreams are interpreted carefully. Sudden illness or bad luck invites speculation. You do not fully dismiss these explanations, even if you do not embrace them openly. Certainty feels risky when understanding is incomplete. Weather contributes its own fears. Storms arrive quickly. Floods reshape ground overnight. Cold tightens its grip without warning. You prepare as best you can, but preparation never feels complete. The elements remind you regularly that control remains partial. Animals inspire both reliance and concern. Livestock represent security, but they also attract predators. Wildlife crosses paths unexpectedly. A rustle in the brush triggers calculation. Threat assessment becomes automatic, shaped by experience rather than panic. Children absorb fear early. They learn where not to go, what not to touch, which sounds, require attention. Instruction blends with warning stories, creating boundaries that feel instinctive rather than imposed. Curiosity remains, but it moves alongside caution. You notice how fear influences behaviour quietly. People travel in pairs more often. Fires are kept brighter at night. Tools are stored within reach. None of this is discussed openly. It becomes habit embedded in routine. Religion offers some comfort here, framing fear within order. Prayer becomes a response to uncertainty. Ritual provides structure when explanation fails. You participate not because doubt disappears, but because ritual steadies it. At times, fear recedes. Familiarity grows. A path becomes well-travelled. A season passes without incident. Confidence builds slowly, though it never replaces awareness entirely. Complacency feels dangerous. Memory keeps fear from fading completely. When loss occurs, fear sharpens again. A sudden death, a missing animal, an unexplained illness. These events reset caution, reminding everyone how thin the margins remain. Life continues, but with slightly tighter grip. As evening deepens, fear softens into watchfulness. You secure doors. You bank fires carefully. You listen one last time before resting. These actions feel calming rather than alarming. Preparation becomes reassurance. Lying down, you sense how fear has shaped you without dominating you. It has taught you to notice, to prepare, to respect limits. Sleep arrives with awareness, still present but quieter, now folded into habit. Tomorrow will bring the same balance. Curiosity alongside caution, hope beside uncertainty. In this world, fear is not something to escape. It is something you learn to live with, guiding you gently towards survival, without ever fully letting you forget how fragile that survival can be. Fear does not arrive here with drama. It settles gradually, becoming part of the background, like dampness or cold. You carry it without naming it most days, feeling it more as awareness than panic. It lives in the edges of thought, guiding choices quietly, long before danger appears. The wilderness presses close. Even when cleared, land surrounds you. Trees stand just beyond the last fence. Shadows move where paths end. At night, sounds carry farther than they should. A branch snaps. An animal cries out. You pause, listening, measuring distance and intent without knowing exactly what you listen for. Superstition fills the spaces where explanation runs thin. Stories circulate about lights seen in marshes, about noises that do not belong to any known creature. Some dismiss them. Others nod quietly, unwilling to challenge what cannot be disproven. These tales rarely end with answers. They end with caution. You notice how fear shapes movement. People avoid certain roads after dark. They choose longer routes that feel safer. They travel in pairs when possible. These habits form without discussion, reinforced by memory and instinct rather than rule. Illness carries its own shadow. A cough that lingers too long invites worry. A fever rising at the wrong time of year feels ominous. You watch bodies closely alert to changes that suggest trouble ahead. Knowledge remains incomplete, but pattern recognition sharpens attention. Children absorb fear differently. They listen to stories with wide eyes, then repeat them imperfectly. Their imaginations stretch details beyond intention. Adults soften narratives when possible, but some truths resist gentling. The world is dangerous. Pretending otherwise feels irresponsible. Faith intersects with fear constantly. Prayer offers structure when outcomes remain uncertain. Some find reassurance there. Others find tension, wondering whether danger reflects moral failing or simple chance. These questions linger unanswered, carried quietly from day to day. You feel fear most sharply during stillness, when work pauses, when night deepens, when you lie awake listening to familiar sounds shift subtly. The mind fills silence quickly. You counter this by focusing on routine, counting breaths, recalling tasks completed. Familiarity steadies thought. There are moments when fear proves useful. It sharpens senses. It encourages preparation. You secure doors more carefully. You bank fires thoroughly. You store food with extra caution. Fear becomes a tool when managed, a liability when allowed to roam freely. Stories of misfortune circulate as warning rather than entertainment. Someone lost on a familiar path. Someone injured by a simple mistake. These accounts do not linger on drama. They emphasize cause. Pay attention. Do not rush. Learn from what happened. As communities grow more settled, fear does not disappear. It adapts. Threats shift from wilderness to scarcity, from isolation to conflict. You adjust again, carrying awareness forward into new shapes. At times, fear attaches itself to people, outsiders, those who behave unpredictably. Difference invites speculation. You watch reactions carefully, aware of how quickly suspicion can harden. Fear seeks explanation even when none fits cleanly. Yet courage exists alongside fear, not in opposition to it. Courage here looks like continuation, waking up despite uncertainty, walking familiar paths despite remembered danger, speaking calmly when anxiety presses. Endurance becomes bravery through repetition. At night, fear softens, but never fully releases. You drift towards sleep, listening for changes, trusting habit to wake you if something goes wrong. Rest arrives not because fear is gone, but because vigilance has done its work for the day. Tomorrow will bring new risks, most of them ordinary. You will meet them as you always do, with attention rather than bravado. In this world, survival depends less on conquering fear than on living alongside it, allowing it just enough space to keep you careful, never enough to keep you still. You begin to sense a shift that is difficult to name at first. It appears in how you speak about places far away, and how those places feel less immediate than they once did. The word home settles differently on your tongue now. It points to where you stand, not where your grandparents once stood, and that realization arrives quietly without announcement. Customs you grew up with start to change shape. Meals adapt to what grows well here, rather than what tradition once prescribed. Clothing reflects climate more than fashion. From across the ocean, tools are altered, repaired, improved, shaped by trial rather than instruction. You notice these changes only in passing as practical responses to daily demands, yet together they form something distinct. Language shifts too. Phrases shorten, accents soften or sharpen, depending on who you speak with. Words from other tongues slip into conversation when they serve better than familiar ones. You do not stop to consider this evolution. You simply speak in the way that makes sense to those around you. Understanding matters more than correctness. Authority feels farther away than it once did, even when it remains present. Decisions made elsewhere arrive late, filtered through layers of interpretation. They do not always fit local realities. You follow instructions when you must, but you adjust them when they do not align with experience. This adjustment does not feel rebellious. it feels necessary. Children grow up without the same reference points their elders carried. They know stories of distant cities and old conflicts, but those stories feel like background rather than foundation. Their sense of belonging anchors itself in rivers, fields, and towns they can touch. When they imagine the future, it unfolds here, not elsewhere. You notice how pride begins to attach itself to endurance rather than origin. People speak with satisfaction about surviving harsh winters, poor harvests, difficult journeys. These experiences become shared markers of identity. Having endured them together matters more than having arrived from somewhere prestigious. Differences between communities become clearer. Customs vary from place to place. Laws are interpreted differently. Worship takes on local character. These distinctions create friction at times, but they also foster attachment. You defend your way of doing things instinctively, even if you cannot fully explain why. Trade and travel reinforce this shift. Goods produced locally gain preference. Skills developed here feel more relevant than imported knowledge. You trust what works in this environment. Success measured elsewhere carries less weight than success measured by survival and stability. Conflict with distant authority begins to feel personal, not ideological. Regulations that ignore local conditions cause frustration. Taxes feel heavier when benefits remain abstract. You discuss these issues quietly with neighbours, not as grand theories, but as practical concerns affecting daily life. At the same time, you remain connected to wider worlds. Letters still arrive. News still circulates. Cultural ties do not vanish. They simply loosen, allowing space for new attachments to form. You find yourself comparing less often, evaluating life on its own terms rather than against remembered standards. Shared hardship accelerates this process. When storms strike or shortages loom, cooperation deepens. Decisions are made collectively, sometimes informally, sometimes through established channels. These moments reinforce trust in local judgment over distant direction. You hear younger voices speak with confidence about the land, as if it has always belonged to their sense of self. They reference seasons, roots, and landmarks with ease. Their familiarity feels complete, unburdened by nostalgia. Watching them, you realise how quickly identity takes root when it is lived rather than inherited. Festivals and gatherings reflect this emerging character. Music shifts. Stories focus on local events. Humour turns inward, drawing from shared experience rather than borrowed reference. These moments feel genuine, grounded, and increasingly separate from older traditions. Even disagreements take on local flavour. Arguments centre on practical matters, land use, trade fairness, community responsibility. These debates shape values organically through participation rather than decree. You feel invested because outcomes affect people you know directly. As night falls, you reflect on how this sense of belonging has formed without ceremony. There was no moment where you decided to become something new. It happened through repetition, through adaptation, through choosing what works over what was expected. Lying down, you feel connected to those around you in ways that feel immediate and solid. Identity here is not abstract. It is carried in hands, habits, and shared memory. Tomorrow will continue shaping it just as today did, quietly without pause. You drift towards sleep with the understanding that you belong to this place now, not because you claimed it, but because it claimed you through daily life, one ordinary moment at a time. Tension rarely arrives with shouting. It enters through small irritations that repeat often enough to settle into conversation, a rule that makes little sense here, a demand that arrives without understanding local conditions, a decision made far away that lands heavily on daily life. You notice these things first as inconveniences, not causes. Authority exists, but it feels distant and abstract compared to the immediacy of neighbours and land. Orders come written in formal language that does not reflect how work actually happens. You read them carefully, then look around at the people who must carry them out. Adjustments follow quietly. Survival leaves little room for strict obedience when it conflicts with experience. Taxes become a frequent topic, not discussed loudly at first, but mentioned in passing. A heavier burden this year, a new fee that arrives without explanation. You calculate what must be given up to meet these demands. Tools repaired later. Supplies stretched thinner. Resentment grows not from ideology, but from arithmetic. Enforcement appears uneven. Some officials press hard, others look the other way. Outcomes depend on personality as much as policy. This inconsistency unsettles you. Predictability matters more than fairness here. Knowing what to expect allows preparation. Uncertainty breeds frustration. Meetings become more frequent. Neighbours gather to discuss shared concerns. Conversations stay measured, cautious. Words are chosen carefully, not because people fear speaking, but because consequences ripple outward. Disagreement exists, but it remains contained. No one wants chaos. Stability still matters. You notice how language shifts during these discussions. People refer to shared effort more often, to local needs, to fairness defined by lived experience rather than instruction. The tone remains practical, but something firmer underlies it, a sense that endurance has limits. Printed notices circulate pinned where many pass. You read them alongside others watching reactions. Raised brows, quiet shakes of the head, brief exchanges afterward. The message lands differently depending on circumstance. Those less affected move on quickly. Those bearing the weight linger. Trade disruptions heighten awareness. Restrictions alter routes. Delays affect supply. You feel these changes in small ways. An item harder to find. A price rising unexpectedly. Daily routines adjust again, absorbing pressure without resolution. Stories from other regions arrive filtered through distance. Similar frustrations elsewhere. Different responses. You compare notes, mentally recognizing patterns without naming them. Shared experience creates connection even across separation. At home, these tensions influence decisions subtly. You conserve more carefully. You plan contingencies. You discuss possibilities with trusted neighbours. Preparation becomes a form of response, quieter than protest, but equally deliberate. Children sense the shift without understanding details. They hear conversations change tone. They notice adults pausing longer before answering questions. The world feels slightly tighter. They adjust instinctively, mirroring caution. Moments of humour still appear, but they carry edge now. Jokes reference burden. Sarcasm sharpens. Laughter releases pressure briefly, then fades. Humour becomes a tool for endurance rather than escape. Faith intersects with tension too. Some turn toward patience and acceptance, others toward justification for resistance. Scripture supports many interpretations. People choose what steadies them often without argument. As seasons continue, pressure does not resolve. It accumulates. You feel it most clearly when comparing effort to reward. When labour increases, but stability does not. This imbalance unsettles deeply rooted assumptions about fairness. At night, lying awake, you think about distance. How decisions travel slowly but impact immediately. How those making them will never see the fields they affect. This awareness sharpens your sense of separation. Sleep comes eventually, but it feels lighter. Thoughts remain active, turning possibilities quietly. Tomorrow will bring work as always, but beneath routine tension hums steadily. You do not know where it leads yet. You only know that the distance between daily life and distant authority feels wider than before, and that awareness itself has begun to change how you see your place in the world. Resistance here does not always look like defiance. More often it takes the shape of complaint, repeated so often it becomes a shared language. You hear it while working, folded into conversation without urgency, a muttered remark about unfair demand, a sigh over another delay. These expressions do not call attention to themselves. They gather weight through familiarity. You notice how people adjust routines first quietly, a task delayed, a rule interpreted loosely, a payment timed to cause the least harm. None of this feels dramatic. It feels careful. People test the edges of expectation to see where flexibility lives. When nothing breaks, the adjustment becomes habit. Talk happens in small circles. At the edge of a field, near the hearth after supper, voices lower not out of fear, but out of respect for consequences. Words are chosen to invite agreement rather than provoke response. A shared nod matters more than a raised voice. Consensus grows sideways. Humour plays a role. Jokes sharpen into commentary. Nicknames appear for officials no one has met. Laughter travels faster than argument, easing tension while spreading ideas. You hear the same joke told in different places, altered slightly, carrying the same meaning. The repetition binds people together. Petitions surface occasionally written carefully, signed deliberately. Names appear in thoughtful order. The act of signing feels heavier than the ink suggests. Each name carries a story, a calculation of risk and trust. These papers move slowly past hand to hand, protected from damage as if they were fragile tools. Boycotts are rare, but choices matter. A merchant notices fewer customers. A supplier waits longer for payment. These shifts are subtle enough to deny intention, clear enough to register impact. No announcement is needed. Patterns speak. Meetings extend longer than planned. People linger after official matters conclude, discussing practical adjustments, how to share burden, how to cover for one another. Cooperation becomes strategy. If pressure increases, support tightens. Networks strengthen through use. You see resistance in small refusals to be hurried. Deadlines met at the last responsible moment. Forms completed without flourish. Compliance delivered in the plainest possible way. The letter of instruction is followed, the spirit interpreted locally. This approach feels safer than open challenge. Craft and labour become statements too. Quality remains high, but extra effort is withheld. Nothing sloppy, nothing generous beyond requirement. Pride stays intact while surplus disappears. Work speaks without words, measuring obligation precisely. Children pick up the tone. They mimic phrases they hear, not fully understanding meaning but sensing alignment. Adults correct details but not sentiment. The feeling passes on, shaped by example rather than instruction. Faith offers language for patience and persistence. Sermons emphasize endurance, fairness, and mutual care. Listeners hear what steadies them. Afterwards, conversations continue with renewed resolve, quieter and more focused. Belief does not replace action, it supports it. There are moments when frustration flares, a harsh enforcement, a sudden loss. Voices rise briefly then settle. Friends intervene, redirecting energy toward planning rather than anger. The goal remains continuity, not spectacle. Survival prefers steadiness. Travellers bring news of similar behaviour elsewhere. Not plans, not slogans, just patterns. People nod as if recognising a familiar shape. Comfort grows in knowing others adjust the same way under the same pressure. Shared behaviour feels safer than isolated complaint. Risk is assessed constantly. Who can afford to push back a little? Who needs protection? Decisions are distributed according to circumstance. Those with less cushion are shielded by those with more. Solidarity takes practical form. At home, you make lists that live only in your head. What can be delayed? What must be met? Where compromise hurts least? These calculations become second nature. You feel capable without feeling bold. Night brings reflection. You replay conversations weighing tone and outcome. You consider whether adjustments helped or harmed. Sleep comes with a sense of participation. You are not alone in these choices. The community moves together even when it does not move loudly. By morning, routine resumes. Work continues. Complaints persist now, familiar, almost comforting. They signal attention, not despair. This is how endurance organises itself. Through repetition, through shared understanding, through everyday resistance that never announces its name, yet shapes the path forward all the same. Night returns the way it always does, without ceremony and without pause. The day loosens its hold, gradually releasing you from movement and noise piece by piece. Tools are set aside, voices lower, doors close with familiar weight. Nothing feels finished yet, everything necessary has been done for now. You eat once more, not because hunger presses sharply, but because routine says it is time. The meal is simple, familiar, it tastes like continuity. You chew slowly, aware of how effort has shaped appetite rather than desire. Warmth spreads through you again, easing the last stiffness from hands and shoulders. The house settles as light fades. Sounds soften. Footsteps slow. Someone banks the fire carefully, ensuring it will last without flaring. The glow dims to a steady presence, no longer demanding attention, simply offering reassurance. Shadows stretch across walls you know by heart. Clothing is removed in layers, folded or placed where it will be needed again soon. You move by memory more than sight now. Every object sits where habit expects it. This familiarity carries comfort deeper than softness ever could. Outside, the world grows quieter, but never silent. Insects continue their work. Wind moves through trees. Somewhere an animal calls, then falls still. These sounds no longer startle you. They belong to the night just as you belong to the house that holds you. You lie down where you always do, sharing space, warmth, breath. Sleep does not come instantly. It rarely does. Thoughts drift through the day without urgency. Tasks completed. Words exchanged. Small moments that linger for no clear reason. None of it demands resolution. Tomorrow already waits, but it does not press. You know what it will ask. The same effort, the same attention, the same endurance. There is comfort in that predictability. You do not need to imagine what comes next. You have done it before. Your breathing slows. The fire crackles softly, then steadies. Muscles release their hold one by one. The world narrows gently to the space you occupy, and the rhythm of rest settling in. The night holds you now patient and unremarkable. You do not feel triumphant. You do not feel defeated. You feel carried forward, which is enough. The house stands, the fire lasts. The community rests around you, each life folded into the same darkness. Nothing here is perfect, nothing is finished. Yet everything continues. Your thoughts soften, edges blurring. The sounds around you become distant, then familiar again in a new way. Sleep does not arrive as escape, it arrives as permission. Tomorrow will begin as it always does, quietly, without asking whether you are ready. But for now, you're allowed to let go, to drift, to rest inside a world that has asked much of you and will ask again, but not tonight. Tonight you breathe, tonight you remain, tonight that is enough. Sweet dreams.